Chapter 322. You've worked hard. Bai Qian smiled at Lu Yi. Go back and rest first. Old Bai, brother Zhao and I. Bai Qian raised his hand to stop him. This old master already knows about your plan, so there's no need to rush. Our sect has already completely sealed off this place, so the news won't spread. Go back and rest for a day. Let Zhaoli handle the rest. You can act together tomorrow. Lu Yi pondered for a moment, then I'll listen to old Bai. Bai Qian pushed his spirit chi and wrapped Lu Yi in it before flying into the sky and disappearing. The reason why he was in such a hurry to take Lu Yi away wasn't because Heaven Expanse sect had any ulterior motives. Lu Yi had broken through all 33 floors of the 100-array pagoda, triggering a resonance with each floor. Heaven Expanse sect had many array cultivators, so many pairs of eyes were staring at Lu Yi, wanting to discuss the Tao of arrays with him. If they didn't take Lu Yi away quickly, they wouldn't be able to escape. Bai Qian understood the morals of his sect's array cultivators better than anyone else. Sure enough, seeing Bai Qian take Lu Yi away, many array cultivators who wanted to talk sighed. Some of the bolder ones actually chased after Bai Qian, and there was no lack of Cloud River Realm cultivators among them. Zhaoli, come with me. The rest of you can disperse, Yu Shao ordered. Yes. Somewhere in the crowd, Zhaoli responded. Soon, Yu Shao also left with Zhaoli, obviously to arrange some matters. After a long time, the clamor in the mountain valley slowly subsided. However, stimulated by Lu Ye's challenge of the 100-array pagoda, many array cultivators rushed into the 100-array pagoda to hone themselves. As for how much they could gain, it was hard to say. After Lu Yi returned to Bai Qian's residence, he stuffed himself with a meal, took a bath, and slept comfortably. When he woke up, it was already the next day. All the accumulated fatigue had been swept away, and his body felt light and refreshed. There was a message left in his battlefield imprint. After checking it, he found that it was from Zhaoli. Heaven Expanse sect was ready, and even the Union sect was ready. They were just waiting for Lu Yi to go all out. Lu Yi sent a message back and asked Zhaoli to make preparations. He also sent a message to Yi and Giant Armor, asking them to meet up with him. While waiting, Lu Yi checked his spirit apertures. After breaking through to the 9th Order Spirit Stream Realm in the first layer of the 100 Formation Pagoda, he had opened 218 spirit apertures. He had stayed in the 100 Formation Pagoda for about 17 days, but he had opened a total of 39 chakras. On average, he could open 1 chakra per level, so he opened 2 chakras per day. Ever since Lu Yi started cultivating, he had never experienced such a quick awakening of the apertures. If the 100 Formation Pagoda was in the Spirit Stream battlefield, he would probably be able to advance to the Cloud River Realm in less than 2 or 3 months. However, this was clearly unrealistic. The generous environment inside the 100 Formation Pagoda was his reward for passing the test. The others who challenged the 100 Formation Pagoda did not receive such good treatment. He couldn't help but look forward to the second part of the 100 Formation Pagoda. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter it for the time being. Before that, he had to work hard to improve his array Tao. Once he could enter, his cultivation would be able to improve rapidly. The benefits he gained from the 100 Formation Pagoda this time were too great. Although he had comprehended and absorbed the benefits of every level, he had limited time at that time. His comprehension and absorption was just a blur and was far from being able to fully comprehend it. Just a blur had increased his array Tao's standard by several times. If he could fully comprehend it, who knew how much he would be able to improve? This required time and accumulation. He was only 22 apertures away from the 240 required to convert a heaven-grade cultivation technique. If he cultivated normally, he should be able to do it in 1.5 months. However, there were many things he had to do next. He probably didn't have that much time to cultivate. He took out the set of pitch-black array flags to investigate. This set of array flags contained many more restrictions than the one he had created. Moreover, the materials used were clearly of better quality. Lu Yi didn't have much contact with heavenly treasures, so he couldn't recognize the materials used to create these array flags. However, since it was a reward from the 100 Formation Pagoda, it naturally wouldn't be bad. In the entire 9 provinces, these array flags were probably the best. Although array flags were only a supplementary method for setting up and breaking arrays, the better the quality of the array flags, the higher the efficiency of breaking arrays. The array's setup would undoubtedly be more stable and powerful. With this set of array flags in hand, Lu Yi was undoubtedly like a tiger that had grown wings. After a short while, Lu Yi stood up and walked out the door. Giant Armor was waiting outside. Hu Po was squatting on top of Giant Armor's head. As for Yi, she was hiding inside Hu Po's body. After half a month, Giant Armor hadn't changed much. However, Hu Po had clearly grown, and his aura had become much more condensed. Lu Yi brought them to bid farewell to Bai Qian. The old man said earnestly, "Little friend Lu, I'll leave the spirit stream realm of the Heaven Expanse sect in your hands. Don't be too radical. Old Bai, don't worry. I'll take back whatever the Heaven Expanse sect lost. Go." Lu Yi bowed and retreated. When they were outside, Giant Armor summoned his flying spirit tool. Lu Yi stood on it. Following Giant Armor's movements, the spirit tool turned into a streak of light and soared into the sky. After a short while, Lu Yi heard Zhao Li's impassioned voice from afar in front of the Divination Hall's plaza. It was obvious that he was mobilizing people before the battle. Along with his shouts, deafening cries of "kill" echoed one after another. In front of the Divination Hall, the killing intent of hundreds of Spirit Stream Realm cultivators soared into the sky. 2 months ago, the Heaven Expanse sect's encampment had been forcefully occupied by the myriad Devil Ridge. Many of the Spirit Stream Realm cultivators had been forced to retreat to their main sect in the 9 state. The entire Heaven Expanse sect had been suppressing a bellyful of anger. What made the Heaven Expanse sect disciples even more sullen was that after the encampment had been occupied, the Heaven Expanse sect had completely sealed it off, making it impossible for them to return to the Spirit Stream battlefield to take revenge. They had waited for 2 whole months, and no one knew what the sect's upper echelons were thinking. The myriad Devil Ridge had already retreated. Even if they couldn't take revenge now, they should quickly rebuild their encampment. Otherwise, where would the Spirit Stream Realm disciples go to cultivate in the future? They couldn't all rely on the encampments of other sections. What would that look like? During this time, many disciples had continuously submitted petitions to go to the Spirit Stream battlefield, but they had all been suppressed by Yu Shao and the Heaven Expanse sect's Elder Council. It could be said that after 2 months of accumulation, the Heaven Expanse sect's anger had reached its limit. They were only a little bit away from exploding. That was until yesterday, when many cultivators saw Lu Yi unharmed at the 100 Formation Pagoda. Some rumors had gradually leaked out, and today, Zhao Li had gathered all the Spirit Stream Realm disciples here. Everyone knew that the time for revenge had come. The Heaven Expanse sect had been lying low for 2 months, not because they were afraid, but because they were waiting for a crucial method. Their emotions were raging. They couldn't wait to start a massacre. The Giant Armor flew down with Lu Yi on its back. Several hundred pairs of eyes looked over. Zhao Li came forward and cupped his fist. "Brother Yi, everything is ready." Lu Yi stepped forward and swept his gaze across the crowd. He saw faces filled with fighting spirit, as well as Yu Shao and a few Sky Expanse sect elders who were watching from afar. He nodded his head slightly. "Let's go." Zhao Li turned around and shouted, "Let's go." Silently, several hundred cultivators rushed to the Heaven's Secret Hall. Using the Heaven's Secret Pillars, they entered their encampment at the Spirit Stream battlefield. Like a flood dragon entering the sea, the Spirit Stream battlefield was turned upside down. The first to enter were body cultivators, followed by soldier cultivators and ghost cultivators, followed by magic cultivators and medical cultivators. Although the myriad Devil Ridge had retreated a long time ago, some things couldn't be left unguarded. If the myriad Devil Ridge's people were lying in ambush, the body cultivators might be able to hold them off. In just a few dozen breaths, several hundred cultivators had all entered the encampment. The ghost cultivators who had scattered to scout the surroundings reported that they didn't see any traces of the enemy. This was normal. It had been 2 months since the encampment had been breached. No matter how arrogant the myriad Devil Ridge was, they couldn't keep occupying someone else's encampment. That wouldn't do them any good. After a short while, a large spirit ship rose into the air in front of the Heaven's secret hall. The Heaven Expanse Sex cultivators boarded the ship. Under Zhao Li's command, the ship quickly flew in a certain direction. On the deck of the ship, Lu Yi and Zhao Li stood side by side. The latter ended the transmission and said, "Mount Azure Billow has also set off. The leader is Mount Azure Billow's guardian, Brother Song Yin. According to Brother Ye's plan, we'll attack the Cool Breeze sect first." How many people did they send? 100 people stayed behind to guard the encampment. The rest all came. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. "Fellow Daoist Song is quite bold." Zhao Li said, "Brother Song has always been steady. To be able to make such a decision, he must have received some instructions from the higher-ups. Perhaps it has something to do with the encampment of our sect. Our sect is adjacent to the encampment. Without the lips, the teeth will be cold. Mount Azure Billow has been nervous for a long time after our encampment was attacked. 2 months ago, Lu Yi had just arrived at the Heaven Expanse Sect's encampment when he was poisoned by a spy from the myriad Devil Ridge. Soon after, the Heaven Expanse Sect's encampment was jointly attacked and occupied by several sects from the myriad Devil Ridge. He was poisoned in the Heaven Expanse Sect's encampment, and the Heaven Expanse Sect couldn't get away with it. However, the Heaven Expanse Sect's encampment was attacked because of his arrival. In this matter, he had implicated the Heaven Expanse Sect, but he also suffered a great loss because of it. In the end, if it weren't for the soul-cleansing water, Giant Armor and Zhao Li might have died even with Shui Yuan's help. It was meaningless to argue about who implicated who in this matter. The myriad Devil Ridge was the one behind the scenes. Just as he had said to Bai Qian before, he would help the Heaven Expanse Sect get back whatever they lost. If they wanted to rebuild their encampment, they would need a large amount of sect merit points. Where would they get them from? Naturally, it would be to attack and occupy the enemy's encampment and plunder their blessings. His purpose in coming to the Heaven Expanse Sect to study Array Dao was to break the defensive formation. Now, he already had the ability to do so. From the map, the Heaven Expanse Sect's position wasn't very good. It was surrounded by 3 myriad Devil Ridge forces in a triangle formation. These 3 forces were the Cool Breeze Sect, the Scarlet Blood Valley, and the Thunder Light Sect. Previously, the cultivators from these 3 forces were the main force in attacking the Heaven Expanse Sect's encampment. The reason why they attacked the Cool Breeze Sect first was that this myriad Devil Ridge force was not only adjacent to the Heaven Expanse Sect, but also to Mount Azure Billow. The Heaven Expanse Sect had nothing to lose now. Since their encampment was already in such a state, it couldn't be that bad. However, Mount Azure Billow still had an encampment. Only by dealing with the Cool Breeze Sect first would Mount Azure Billow would they have no worries in the future. Chapter 323. Of course, there was another reason for targeting the Clear Wind Sect first. The Myriad Devil Ridge was a 6th grade power, while the Scarlet Blood Valley and the Lightning Light Sect were 5th grade. As Lu Ye's first battle after faking his death, it was better to pick on a soft persimmon first, even though this persimmon might not be that soft. The large ship continued forward. When it passed by the Sky Expanse Sect's mine, over 100 streaks of light flew down from the ship and entered the mine. Not long after, they returned. Many cultivators had bloodstains on their bodies, which were left behind by the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who had been mining in their own mines. After the Sky Expanse sect's encampment was captured, they sealed the sect and didn't make any movements for 2 months. The nearby myriad Devil Ridge forces naturally didn't want to miss the opportunity to plunder resources, so they sent some cultivators here. As the Sky Expanse sect's cultivators approached the Clear Wind sect's encampment, the news gradually spread. It was impossible to hide such a large-scale operation. Cultivators could always obtain information about their enemies through various channels. As enemies, it was common for each side to plant ghost cultivators to monitor each other's encampment. The Clear Wind sect's encampment was suddenly in a state of panic. The Guardian and Deputy Guardian hurriedly recalled the cultivators outside and sent a message to the Scarlet Blood Valley and the Lightning Light sect for reinforcements. If it was only the Sky Expanse sect attacking, the Clear Wind sect wouldn't be afraid. However, it wasn't just the Sky Expanse sect that had come. Many people from the Azure Billow Mountain had also come, which put some pressure on the Clear Wind sect. The two sects had sent out less than 1,000 people, but there were still 800 to 900 of them. It was enough for the Clear Wind sect to take them seriously. To be honest, the Clear Wind sect didn't understand what the Sky Expanse sect was planning. If they couldn't take down the encampment in a short time, the Clear Wind sect could launch a pincer attack with reinforcements. At that time, the Sky Expanse sect and the Azure Billow Mountain would definitely suffer. Just as the Clear Wind sect was feeling suspicious, a large ship spirit artifact appeared 5 kilometers away from the encampment. It didn't continue forward, but instead quietly floated in the air. From the insignia on the ship, it seemed to be the Azure Billow Mountain. After all, they were neighbors, so the Azure Billow Mountain had arrived faster. After waiting for about an hour, another ship arrived, and the Sky Expanse sect's cultivators had arrived. The two ships sailed side by side towards the Cool Breeze sect's encampment. A figure flew out from the Azure Billow Mountain ship and landed on the Sky Expanse sect's ship. On the deck of the ship, Lu Yi looked at the newcomer. It was an imposing man with a calm expression. It was the guardian of Azure Billow Mountain, Song Yin. Zhao Li introduced them to each other. Lu Yi and Song Yin greeted each other. Song Yin went straight to the point. Brother Yi, Brother Zhao has told me some things about you, but I still want to ask, how confident are you in breaking the formation? And how long will it? Guardians, courses, guardians. Guardian. Of. To Guardian was. He agreed to work with Zhao Li. First, he had a good personal relationship with Zhao Li. He trusted Zhao Li's character. Second, Zhao Li had assured him that Lu Yi could break the Clear Wind sect's defensive formation. Zhao Li smiled bitterly. Brother Song, Brother Yi is someone who can trigger 33 consecutive resonations in the 100 formation pagoda. He has also led people to attack several myriad Devil Ridge's encampments. Now that his formation Dao cultivation has greatly increased, breaking the formation won't be a problem. Song Yin looked at Lu Yi and calmly said, I don't know much about Array Dao, but I do know that the Cool Breeze sect has already asked for outside help. The Scarlet Blood Valley and the Thunder Light sect have each dispatched 300 to 400 people on the way. If we delay here for too long, once the myriad Devil Ridge's reinforcements arrive, our situation will be very bad. If we want to succeed, we have to break the formation as soon as possible, occupy the Cool Breeze sect's encampment, and disrupt the myriad Devil Ridge's deployment. Although he didn't ask any more questions, he wanted Lu Yi to give him a direct answer. If you can't break the formation within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Azure Billow Mountain's cultivators may withdraw. Zhao Li looked shocked. Song Yin furrowed his brow. Even if he said that he didn't know much about formations and didn't know what it meant to trigger 33 consecutive resonations in the 100 formation pagoda, a ninth-order spirit stream realm cultivator wanting to break a encampment's defensive formation in an incense stick's worth of time was a bit arrogant. For a moment, Song Yin couldn't help but want to immediately withdraw with his cultivators. Before coming here, He had heard some rumors about blue blood sects Lu Yi, including some things about the battle on Golden Light Peak. Originally, he admired Lu Yi, but now it seemed that the rumors weren't reliable. This young man in front of him was too arrogant. After pondering for a moment, Song Yin said, "Then I'll wait and see." An incense stick's worth of time wasn't long. There was no harm in waiting. He flew back to his ship's spirit artifact. Zhao Li was a little worried. "Brother Yi, can you really break the formation in an incense stick's worth of time?" He knew very well how Lu Yi had led Xin Ying Palace and Ling Yun Palace to break through the encampments of Windflower Courtyard and Sun Shrouding Mountain. It was a trick, not a true method of breaking the formation. That method was easy to counter. Even though Lu Ye's attainment in formations had improved after going through the Tower of 100 Formations, it was still too much to break the formation in an incense stick's worth of time. Zhao Li was also a formation cultivator, so he knew how difficult it was. Yes. Lu Ye's reply was firm and decisive. It only took them a while to cover 10 miles. 2 big ships landed. Cultivators of the 2 sects walked out from the ship. Across the light screen of the Great Formation, the cultivators of Sky Expanse sect and Cool Breeze sect looked at each other with fire in their eyes. 2 months ago, many of them looked at each other like this too. However, the positions were reversed now. Although they were under siege, the cultivators of Cool Breeze sect didn't seem to be nervous. They all knew that it was impossible for Sky Expanse sect and Cool Breeze sect to break the Great Formation in a short time. Their own reinforcements were on the way. It wouldn't take long for them to arrive. By then, the positions would be reversed. Until Lu Yi stepped forward. In the crowd, the guardian of Cool Breeze sect looked at Lu Yi up and down for a while. He even rubbed his eyes and was surprised. "You are not dead?" Obviously, he recognized Lu Yi. He hadn't seen Lu Yi in person, but he had seen Lu Ye's image. Because of the destruction of Windflower Courtyard and Sunlight Mountain, Lu Yi was listed as a key target of surveillance. Many people paid attention to Lu Ye's information and images. 2 months ago, the SEAL envoy of Jade Blood Sect caused havoc in Sky Expanse Sect Station. He fought 1 against 5, and the Sky Expanse Sect's Grand Elder was even injured. That wasn't the end. The SEAL envoy killed his way into the spiritual stream battlefield for the 2nd time with his True Lake Stage cultivation base. He killed dozens of cultivators from Myriad Devil Ridge before retreating under the punishment of soul-extinguishing thunder. The sect master of Jade Blood Sect went to Thunder Province. Although he didn't do anything, he still made the Divine Ocean Stage cultivators in Thunder Province nervous. Even Li Baxian, who was ranked 3rd on the spiritual stream list, caused a bloody storm in the core region. All of this was because Lu Yi was poisoned to death in Sky Expanse Sect Station. This news was verified by Haotian Alliance and Myriad Devil Ridge. Myriad Devil Ridge's side rejoiced for a long time because of this. They no longer had to worry about their station's grand formation being broken. But now, the guy who should have been dead was actually alive and well. He had appeared right in front of him. This matter was very outrageous. The guard envoy of Clear Wind sect found it hard to accept this reality, but he soon understood what was going on. His mood was incomparably complicated, and he secretly cursed those guys from Jade Blood sect for being inhumane. Their acting was very realistic. If it weren't for the Jade Blood sect's abnormal reaction, Myriad Devil Ridge wouldn't have been able to conclude that Lu Yi was dead. What kind of damned sect was this? The sect master and SEAL envoy, as well as the disciples of the sect, had worked together to put on a big show and deceive the entire 9 provinces. How could they be so sinister and cunning? Just as he was silently cursing in his heart, the cultivators of the 2 sects had already begun to arrange their troops. Under Lu Ye's guidance, the armament stage cultivators stepped forward and lined up in a certain area of the Grand Formation. Behind them were the armament stage cultivators and the ghost stage cultivators, followed by the Dharma stage cultivators. There were only a dozen or so medicine stage cultivators standing far away, ready to save people at any time. Seeing this scene, the guard envoy of Clear Wind Sect's heart skipped a beat, because the enemy's formation was obviously for a strong attack. How could he not be nervous after learning from the mistakes of Windflower Yard and Sunlight Mountain? However, he quickly comforted himself that the Windflower Yard and Sunlight Mountain's grand formations were broken because Lu Ye had used some trick. He didn't really break the grand formations, so as long as he kept an eye on Lu Ye and didn't let him do anything secretly, the problem was not big. Just as he was thinking this, Lu Ye stepped forward and looked up at the grand formation in front of him. His eyes were flowing with spiritual light as he looked at the Insight Spirit pattern. When he completed those tests in the 100 Formation Pagoda, Lu Ye only used the Insight Spirit pattern to verify some of his inferences and improve his attainment. Now that he was breaking someone's grand formation, there was naturally no need to hide his strength. The Insight Spirit pattern had already been activated. After a while, Lu Ye raised his hand and shot out a stream of spiritual power, hitting a certain spot on the Grand Formation's light screen. The next moment, a disciple of Sky Expanse Sect flew out and stood there with a black formation flag in his hand. It was the reward Lu Ye got from the 100 Formation Pagoda. On the 33rd floor of the 100 Formation Pagoda, he broke a grand formation, but it took him more than 4 hours. That was because he didn't have any external force to rely on at that time. Now it was different. Sky Expanse Sect had a lot of formation cultivators. With their cooperation, it would be more efficient to break the formation. Besides, Lu Ye didn't need to break the entire grand formation. Therefore, on the way here, Lu Ye had asked Zhao Li to find 31 formation cultivators and distribute his formation flags to them. As Lu Ye kept doing it, one formation cultivator after another came to different positions with formation flags in their hand. After a while, 31 people were all in position. The guard envoy of the Cool Breeze Sect knew that the situation was not good. He had already put away his previous underestimation and took out the formation Jade Slit Ring. He activated it with all his might, pushing the power of the formation to its maximum. He didn't know anything about formations, but he knew that Lu Ye of Blue Blood Sect had come prepared this time. He didn't want to repeat the mistakes of Windflower Yard and Sunlight Mountain. Chapter 324. When everything was ready, Lu Ye came to the last position and gently waved the formation flag in his hand, causing spirit energy to surge. The other 31 formation flags immediately resonated with each other, and all the formation cultivators holding the flags began to act. A total of 32 formation flags were attached to the light screen. As the formation cultivators led by Lu Ye worked, the pitch-black formation flags melted into the light screen at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lu Ye raised an eyebrow. The formation flags rewarded by the 100 Formation Pagoda were more useful than he'd expected. Zhao Li and Song Yin, who were watching this scene, were shocked. Zhao Li himself was a formation cultivator, so he could see some things. Although Song Yin didn't know much about formations, she could tell from the scene that things were progressing smoothly. The guardian of the Cool Breeze Sect panicked. He'd never seen such a strange method before. The formation Jade Pendant was in his hand, and he could clearly sense that some foreign objects had melded into the formation. But just when he wanted to activate the Jade Pendant to expel these foreign objects, he couldn't lock onto the target at all. It felt as if the foreign objects had already melded into the formation. Not to mention that he'd never seen such a method before, there had never been one in the Spirit Stream battlefield since ancient times. The cultivation bases of Spirit Stream Realm cultivators were not very high. Even those veteran Spirit Stream Realm cultivators, who had focused on cultivating the Tao of spell formations for decades, were limited by their own cultivation bases, and their accomplishments were limited. Perhaps they might be able to break through some small-scale spell formations, but it would be extremely difficult for them to shake something as colossal as the defensive spell formation of the encampment. As the 32 formation flags melded into the light screen, Lu Yi, who held the main formation flag, immediately felt the flow of spirit energy from the formation. It felt as if he'd reached his hand into a flowing stream. Then the next step was simple. With the power of the 32 flags, at the 2 nodes of the formation, they suppressed the flow of spiritual power in the area where the flags were. In this way, the formation in this area could be broken. That's right, Lu Yi hadn't prepared to break an entire formation from the beginning. Even if he had the experience of breaking through formations alone, and even if he had the help of 31 formation cultivators, it would still take a lot of time. Moreover, the formation he'd broken in the 100 formation pagoda wasn't manned by anyone, so it wasn't the same as the one before him. All he needed to do was to open a gap in the formation, a gap big enough for the cultivators of the 2 sects to attack. When he attacked the base of the Sunlight Mountain, he used a similar method. However, he wasn't good at formations at that time. What he did was to tear open the formation at a node and then lead Zhu Jia and the other 10 body cultivators into the base of the Sunlight Mountain to take the Jade Pendant. That would only work when there weren't many people guarding the base. If there were dozens of people guarding the base back in St. Sunlight Mountain, Lu Yi wouldn't dare to do anything rash. If the spiritual power flowing on the light screen was compared to a stream, then what he had to do now was to use the power of the formation flags to build 2 dams in this section of the stream, turning the flowing water into stagnant water, and then directly cut off this section of the separated area. The array flags buzzed, and Lu Ye's spirit power surged. The 31 array cultivators felt the feedback from the array flags and worked together with Lu Yi. The guard of the Qingfeng sect suddenly changed his expression. He clearly felt something wrong with the formation. He hurriedly operated the Jade Pendant to make all kinds of changes, but it was useless. No matter what he did, Lu Yi could adjust the formation as fast as he could. In the area covered by the array flags, the flow of spiritual power slowed down visibly and then stopped. It only took 50 breaths to do it. "Brother Zhao!" Lu Yi shouted. Zhao Li had been waiting for this, so he shouted angrily, "Kill!" In the next instant, streaks of flowing light covered the area in front of them. After only 1 round of fierce attacks, the light screen in front of them was broken like a mirror. Crack! The guard of the Qingfeng sect was stunned. All the disciples of the Qingfeng sect were stunned. Song Yin was stunned too. When Lu Yi told him that he could break the formation within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he didn't believe it no matter what. He only felt that Lu Yi was boasting. If it weren't for Zhao Li's face, he would have retreated with his cultivators. But in reality, it hadn't even taken an incense stick's worth of time. From the time Lu Yi attacked until the formation's light screen was broken, it had only taken 5 minutes. Even someone as calm as him couldn't help but gulp. Could a defensive formation be broken so easily? What he saw completely overturned his understanding of the world. Although he was shocked, Song Yin's hands did not remain idle. Almost at the instant the great formation was broken, a furious roar rang out. The cultivators of the 2 sects rushed into the Qingfeng sect's encampment through the huge gap in the formation's light screen. As soon as the 2 sides came into contact, the Qingfeng sect's forces collapsed like a landslide. In an instant 20 to 30 cultivators fell into pools of blood. The remaining cultivators all retreated in panic. It wasn't that the Qingfeng sect couldn't endure, but that they hadn't expected their own defensive formation to be so weak. Before breaking the formation, the cultivators of the Sky Expanse sect and the Azure Billow Mountain sect had already formed a strong offensive formation. Each sect's cultivators had their own positions, and the 800 to 900 cultivators had gathered together to form a single unit. Strong body cultivators wielded defensive spirit tools and stood at the front, enduring the enemy's attack. However, the Qingfeng sect hadn't made such preparations. They had gathered together in a disorderly manner, completely unprepared to be attacked. Moreover, there was a huge difference in numbers. This caused the Qinfeng sect to appear so weak that it couldn't even stand a gust of wind. Battle cries rang out one after another. After the cultivators of the two sects charged into the Qinfeng sect's encampment, their figures didn't stop moving. That was the location of the Qinfeng sect's Tianji Hall. Although they could obtain a great deal of benefits by simply attacking the other side's encampment, if they didn't kill the enemy would rise again sooner or later. Therefore, this time, the Sky Expanse sect and the Azure Billow Mountain sect had joined hands not only to attack the Qinfeng sect's encampment, but also to kill as many of their cultivators as they could. The momentum of the two sects' cultivators was unstoppable. Along the way, the Qinfeng sect's cultivators were constantly cut down. Giant armor was at the forefront. His spirit energy and blood qi mixed together to form a solid layer of protection. The hasty attacks of the Qinfeng sect's cultivators were like tickles to him. This caused the body cultivators who were charging together with him to raise their eyebrows in envy. At the same time, when the spirit array was broken, Lu Yi casually waved his hand and retrieved his 32 array flags. As the cultivators of the two sects charged into the Qinfeng sect's encampment, the 4 spirit artifacts turned into streams of light and flew back and forth within 600 meters, leaving behind a trail of blood. Wherever they passed, specks of red light would fly out from the corpses lying on the ground and fall into the battlefield mark on the back of his hand. Now that he was at the 9th Order Spirit Stream realm, his strength had increased compared to before. The power of his Imperial artifact was more than several times greater than when he was at the 8th Order. This was not only because of the increase in his cultivation, but also because of the increase in his spiritual energy. Inside the 100 Array Pagoda, he kept drinking soul-cleansing water to wash away the fatigue in his mind. However, the effect of the soul-cleansing water was not as simple as washing away the fatigue in his mind. More than half a bottle of soul-cleansing water was used up. At this moment, the toughness of his soul was not even comparable to that of an ordinary Cloud River Realm cultivator. The most obvious sign was that Lu Yi could now control the 4 Imperial artifacts without any pressure. Even adding 2 spirit crests to the 4 spirit artifacts was a piece of cake. The limit of an ordinary 9th Order Realm artifact manipulation was around 400 meters. Any further and they would not be able to control it. However, Lu Ye's Imperial artifact manipulation was 600 meters. What kind of concept was a gap of 20 meters? It meant that cultivators of the same level could not even think of getting close to him and would be killed by his Imperial artifact manipulation. Walking through the chaotic battlefield, Lu Ye's figure did not stop, his gaze fixed on the Qinfeng sect's guardian. With the support of the wind travel spirit crests, his figure rapidly rushed forward. The fleeing Qinfeng sect cultivators in front of him turned around to block him, but Hu Po, who was crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder, let out a tiger roar. A visible wave of qi rushed forward, causing the cultivators to show a pained expression as they saw stars. Although they quickly came back to their senses, what greeted them was the Imperial artifact manipulation, as well as Yi, who was following closely behind Lu Yi, unleashing a series of spells. Miserable screams rang out one after another. More than a dozen Qinfeng sect cultivators were lying on the ground, their blood staining the ground red. Without stopping, Lu Yi rushed in front of the Qinfeng sect's guardian in a few steps. This person was also a weapon cultivator. With a horrified expression, he summoned his spirit artifact. However, a snow-white blade flashed before his eyes, and his head flew high into the air. Lu Yi swept past him, a large formation jade pendant appearing in his hand. He was in no hurry to refine it, instead continuing to pursue the Qinfeng sect cultivators. At that moment, the Qinfeng sect's Tianji Hall had already been occupied by the two sects' cultivators. Under Zhao Li and Song Yin's joint command, they left a few people to block the entrance, preventing any Qingfeng sect cultivators from approaching. The rest maintained their previous formation and continued to advance, suppressing the Qingfeng sect cultivators' escape route. Although Lu Yi had broken through a certain area of the Cool Breeze Gates array, the array was still operating. After Lu Yi retrieved his array flags, the area that had been broken through was slowly recovering under the effects of the array's self-repair. At that speed, it wouldn't take long for the Great Formation to completely recover. This meant that if the Qingfeng sect cultivators wanted to escape, they could only escape through that opening. Otherwise, there was no other way out. But how could the two sects' cultivators allow them to escape in that direction so easily? In all the confrontations between the two factions on the Spirit Stream battlefield, there had never been a time when the Qingfeng sect's Great Formation cultivators had fallen into such despair. In the past, even if the Great Formation of the Qingfeng sect's Great Formation was broken, they could still return to the 9 provinces through the Tianji Hall. But now that the Tianji Hall had been occupied, the Great Formation that was supposed to shelter them from the wind and rain had become their prison. In this desperate situation, the surviving Qingfeng sect cultivators didn't resign themselves to their fate. Instead, they began to counterattack. However, the difference in numbers was too great. The Qingfeng sect's cultivators were already inferior to the two sects' combined forces. Now that some of them had died and some of them had escaped from the Tianji Hall, they only had less than 200 cultivators left. How could they be a match for 800 to 900 cultivators? Chapter 325. Even though they had the absolute advantage, the cultivators of the two sects didn't seem to be in a hurry. They maintained their previous formation. No one wanted to encounter an accident when they were about to pluck the fruits of victory. That could lead to death. The surviving cultivators of the Cool Breeze sect organized a few attacks, but they were all blocked by the body cultivators led by Giant Armor. In the process of charging and retreating, cultivators were constantly killed, and their corpses fell one after another. Among them, Lu Yi killed the most. 4 imperial weapons with a range of 600 feet. He could even add spirit patterns to his weapons, allowing him to kill several people with a single shuttle. In the end, the spiritual energy stored in the 4 imperial weapons was used up. After an incense stick's worth of time, when the last cultivator of the Cool Breeze sect fell, heaven-shaking cheers sounded. The cultivators of the two sects were shouting and celebrating. No one had ever experienced such a great victory. Not only did they conquer the enemy's base, but they also killed almost all of the enemy's cultivators. This attack and defense battle was enough to be recorded in the annals of the Spirit Stream battlefield and be revered by future generations. Especially the cultivators of the Sky Expanse sect. After holding back their anger for 2 months, they were finally able to vent it. Everyone's face was flushed, as if it was the new year. Compared to what happened 2 months ago, they had vented their anger today. They only felt that their minds were clear, and they were incomparably carefree. I have an incense stick's worth of time to clean up the battlefield. Everyone, get moving! Zhao Li shouted. In his and Lu Ye's plan, the Cool Breeze sect was only the first stop. There were 2 more stops after that. The Cool Breeze sect was too careless, so this battle went extremely smoothly. However, the Myriad Devil Ridge would be prepared for the next battle, so they might not be able to achieve such great results. The cultivators of the two sects immediately moved and scattered to clean up the battlefield. An incense stick's worth of time wasn't long. If they didn't hurry, they wouldn't make it in time. Lu Yi began to refine the formation jade. When they were attacking the Windflower Yard and the Sunlight Mountain, they had no choice but to destroy the formation jade pendant. That was the only way to break the formation. Things were different now. The defensive formation of the Cool Breeze sect was still fine. All they needed to do was to refine the formation jade pendant, shut down the formation, and dig out the formation base. Buying a defensive array from the Tianji treasury would cost a lot of contribution points. On the other hand, Zhao Li and Song Yin headed to the Heavenly Fate Hall to plunder the Clear Wind Gate's Heavenly Fate Pillar. The former took 70% while the latter took 30%. Of the 70% of the Sky Expanse Sect's Heavenly Fate Pillar, a part of it was Lu Yi. Since Lu Yi had promised Bai Qian that he would bring them to retrieve whatever the Sky Expanse Sect had lost, he naturally had to fulfill his promise. Furthermore, according to their previous agreement, the Cool Breeze Sect's defensive formation would belong to him. Lu Yi had no use for it, but he could sell it to the Heaven Expanse Sect or the Heaven's Secret Treasury. If he sold it to the former, he could obtain a lot of cultivation resources, and if he sold it to the latter, he could obtain merits. After a short while, Lu Yi activated the formation Jade Pendant and closed the formation. Then, he found some people to help him dig out all the formation bases of the formation and put them in his storage bag. While they were busy, the news of the Cool Breeze Sect's base being occupied quickly spread through the myriad Devil Ridges camp. Then, it spread to the Grand Heaven Alliance's camp. The Jade Blood Sect's Luia, who was rumored to have been poisoned to death, didn't die. This time, the Cool Breeze Sect's base being occupied was his doing. According to the disciples of the Cool Breeze Sect who had escaped back to the 9 continents in time, Luia had only spent a few dozen breaths to break a huge hole in the defensive formation. Then, the disciples of the Sky Expanse Sect and the Kanglin Mountain, who had long been prepared, swarmed in. The Cool Breeze Sect was caught off guard and couldn't form an effective defense. In this battle, the Cool Breeze Sect's base was broken. Over 400 Spirit Stream stage cultivators were killed. Almost all the inner cultivators were killed. When the news spread out, the entire 9 continents was shocked. What shocked people wasn't only that Luia, who should have been dead, came back to life. What shocked people even more was the way he broke the defensive formation. When he led people to occupy the Windflower Sect and the Sunlight Mountains base, he had used some tricks, which made him easy to be targeted. But now, his method was more than 10 times better. It was a real method to break the defensive formation. There was no way to target him. If this guy really attacked the Cool Breeze Sect's base, the defensive formation wouldn't be able to resist. After 2 months of peace, the sects of the Wanamo Ridge became nervous again. 2 months ago, when they received all kinds of news, they rejoiced and celebrated Luia's death. However, now it seemed that it was just a pretense. Luia was still alive and well. After hiding in the Sky Expanse Sect for 2 months, his attainment in Array Dao had improved beyond imagination. Many of the Formation Dao cultivators who were proficient in the Dao of Formations, upon hearing this news, exclaimed that it was impossible. No matter how talented a Spirit Stream stage cultivator was, it would be impossible for them to break through a defensive formation in a few dozen breaths of time. Not to mention seeing such a thing, they had never even heard of it. If the defensive formation was so easy to break, which sect would be safe in the future? However, the truth was right in front of their eyes. They had to believe it. The entire 9 continents was in an uproar because of this. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, the cultivators of the Red Blood Valley and the Thunderlight sect were in a panic. They had been on the way to reinforce the Cool Breeze sect. It wouldn't take long for them to arrive and coordinate with the Cool Breeze sect. Who would have thought that they would suddenly receive such a shocking news? The Cool Breeze sect's base was captured. Almost all of the Cool Breeze sect's cultivators were killed. The cultivators leading the 2 sects almost thought that someone was joking with them. After confirming it several times, they realized that it wasn't a joke. Their hot blood was instantly shrouded in a bone-chilling cold. They didn't need to reinforce the Cool Breeze sect anymore. Halfway there, they turned around and hurriedly returned to their sect's base. Now that the Cool Breeze sect's base was captured, it would be their turn next. Especially the Red Blood Valley, which was closer to the Cool Breeze sect, would obviously be the next target. For a time, the Red Blood Valley's Guardian and Deputy Guardian were grief-stricken. They urgently asked for outside help. At the same time, they sent a message to the Thunder Light sect to discuss whether or not to send reinforcements first. Because the Thunder Light sect's manpower was ready-made and on the way, as long as the Thunder Light sect was willing to send reinforcements, the chances of defending the Red Blood Valley would be very high. The Thunder Light sect also knew that without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. The leader of the Thunder Light sect was inclined to agree to the Red Blood Valley's request for reinforcements. However, as a deputy guardian, he didn't dare to make a decision on his own. He could only send a message back to the sect and ask for instructions from the sect's elders. Soon, he received a reply that the Thunder Light sect's upper echelons agreed to the Red Blood Valley's request for reinforcements. The leader of the Thunder Light sect's cultivators immediately changed their course and rushed towards the Red Blood Valley's base. At the same time, the Sky Expanse sect and Azure Billow Mountain cultivators, who had already cleaned up the battlefield, had already set off for the next stop. On the Sky Expanse sect's large ship, Lu Yi led a group of formation cultivators and busied themselves on the deck. Speed was crucial in war. The news of them capturing the Cool Breeze sect's base would definitely spread out. Once the Red Blood Valley was on guard, the next battle wouldn't be so easy. Therefore, they had to hurry to the Red Blood Valley's base and catch them off guard. Moreover, if his guess was correct, whether it was the Scarlet Blood Valley or the Thunder Light religion, there should be reinforcements arriving. At this time, they should be retreating. As long as his side was fast enough, it was still possible to catch up with the enemy. This kind of large ship spirit tool that could carry several hundred people was purchased from the Tianji treasury. It was expensive and its speed wasn't slow, but it wasn't too fast either. Compared to a person's flying speed, it was undoubtedly slower. Even if the Sky Expanse sect's cultivators in charge of controlling the ship went all out and raised its speed to the limit, there was still a limit. What Lu Yi was doing now was to increase the ship's speed. As he and a group of formation cultivators busied themselves, a moment later, a formation that enveloped the entire ship was formed. This formation didn't require any special attention. It simply used a large wind-type spirit pattern as the core and 16 formation flags as the foundation to form the formation. The wind-type spirit pattern could strengthen oneself and amber, so naturally, it could also strengthen a flying spirit tool. However, the ship was too big and Lu Ye's strength wasn't enough. However, it was different with the help of the formation. The 16 formation flags played a role in stabilizing the wind-type spirit pattern that Lu Yi constructed on the ship. At the same time, it could also absorb external spirit energy to replenish itself, preventing the spirit pattern from dissipating so easily. A large number of spirit stones were placed around the formation flags. The spirit energy within the spirit stones was injected into the large formation. Following Lu Ye's actions, the newly arranged large formation hummed and began to operate. Complex patterns appeared and lit up the entire deck. In the next moment, the Sky Expanse sect's ship that was originally traveling side by side with MT Azure Billow's ship flew out like a wild horse and turned into a small black dot in the blink of an eye. On MT Azure Billow's ship, Song Yin was counting the casualties of her sect's cultivators when she sensed something amiss. She turned her head and was dumbfounded. She quickly sent a message to Zhao Li to inquire about the situation. On the Sky Expanse sect's ship, the several hundred cultivators were caught off guard by the sudden acceleration of the ship. They swayed from side to side and finally stabilized themselves with great difficulty. Lu Yi hurriedly adjusted the formation. He had set up many formations in the 100 Formation Pagoda, but this was the first time he had set up a formation that increased speed. It was inevitable that he was somewhat inexperienced. If he didn't adjust it, it wouldn't take more than an hour for the formation to overload and collapse. Slowly, the large ship's speed decreased, but the formation's operation began to stabilize. Even though the ship had slowed down, it was still twice as fast as before. Zhao Li replied to Song Yin's message and explained what had just happened. He also had the sex cultivators pay attention to the surroundings. 2 hours later, a cultivator reported that a large ship had appeared to the side. Judging from the ship's course, it was clearly heading for Scarlet Blood Valley's encampment. Zhao Li's spirits were greatly roused. He knew that his previous conjecture was correct. Just as they were preparing to attack the Cool Breeze sect, Scarlet Blood Valley's reinforcements had indeed arrived. However, their efficiency was too high. Before the enemy's reinforcements arrived, the Cool Breeze sect's encampment had already been occupied. This caused the reinforcements to have no choice but to withdraw. Wasn't the reason why they had hurried over in pursuit? Crash! On the deck, Zhao Li gave the order. Chapter 326. Following Zhao Li's command, the Heaven Expanse sect's ship charged straight ahead. The enemy had clearly noticed the commotion, and a group of cultivators on the deck peeked their heads out to look, quickly becoming restless. They didn't know why the Heaven Expanse sect's ship was so fast and had never experienced such a thing before. However, seeing such a large flying spirit tool charging towards them, they were still quite flustered. Shouts and orders could be heard from the deck. The cultivators overseeing the ship were ordering their disciples to change course and avoid the collision. However, after trying for a moment, they found that it was useless as the enemy was simply too fast. On the Heaven Expanse sect's ship, a cultivator reported, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhao, that's not Scarlet Blood Valley, it's the Bright Lightning sect. Who cares? Let's charge over first." Yes. They originally thought that it was the Scarlet Blood Valley's reinforcements, but it turned out to be the Bright Lightning sect. In any case, they were going to beat up the enemy sooner or later. At this time, the Bright Lightning sect's vice-envoy's mouth was filled with bitterness. They had gone to support the Clear Wind sect, but before they could arrive, the Clear Wind sect's encampment had been captured. When they retreated, the Scarlet Blood Valley had urgently requested for reinforcements, so they changed course to support the Scarlet Blood Valley. Now, the Heaven Expanse sect had caught up to them halfway. He couldn't understand how the Heaven Expanse sect's spirit tool could be so fast. Under his nervous gaze, the two ships grew closer and closer. The Bright Lightning sect's ship was the first to release a protective barrier. Naturally, this barrier wasn't as strong as the encampment's grand formation, but it still had some defensive power. On the other hand, the Heaven Expanse sect didn't immediately release a barrier. Instead, they shot out spell techniques at the enemy's ship. It wasn't until they were 20 meters away that the Heaven Expanse sect's ship's barrier lit up. Seeing this, the Bright Lightning sect's vice-envoy felt his heart turn cold. Everyone's ship was bought from the Heavenly Fate Treasury, so there was little difference in quality and performance. The other side had used a few rounds of spell techniques to weaken their defenses before charging over. It was clear that they had taken advantage of the situation. He inwardly cursed the Heaven Expanse sect for being despicable and shameless, but he also knew that this was due to his lack of experience. But how could he be blamed? The Lightning Light religion had never encountered such a thing before. Not to mention the Lightning Light religion, no one in the entire Spirit Stream battlefield had ever encountered such a thing. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the bow of the Sky Expanse sect's ship slammed into the stern of the Lightning Brilliance cult's ship. A huge boom rang out, and all of the cultivators from the two sects were thrown off balance. Some of them even fell onto the deck. The protective light screens of the two ships shattered one after another, turning into specks of fluorescent light that drifted away. On the deck, Lu Yi clung tightly to the side of the ship as the ship groaned in pain. Then, a huge shadow loomed over his head. Looking up, it was the bottom of the Thunder Light religion's ship. The instant they collided, the bow of the Sky Expanse sect's ship stabbed into the bottom of the Lightning Brilliance religion's ship due to their speed. The Lightning Brilliance religion's ship was directly lifted up. After another bout of friction and vibration, the Lightning Brilliance religion's ship tumbled and fell to the ground at an angle. Miserable screams rang out one after another from that direction. Immediately after, a number of figures rushed out, hurriedly summoning their own flying spirit tools to stabilize their bodies. Some of the cultivators weren't strong enough and didn't have enough control over their own spirit power. Even after summoning their own flying spirit tools, they still found it difficult to control them. There were more than 300 people on the Lightning Brilliance Religion's ship, but after the ship was sent flying, only 100 or so cultivators flew out. Without exception, all of them quickly fled towards the Scarlet Blood Valley's encampment. On the other hand, the Sky Expanse Sect's ship shook violently for a moment, but didn't show any signs of falling. The Sky Expanse Sect's cultivators leapt up and turned to chase after the Lightning Brilliance Religion's cultivators. Luyi rushed to the front. He was the first to move, and his speed was the fastest. Before a cultivator switched to a heaven-grade cultivation method, they wouldn't fight in the air because they didn't have enough control over their own spirit power. Fighting while flying on a flying spirit tool was very easy for accidents to occur. It could be said that a cultivator flying on a flying spirit tool would have their strength greatly reduced. This situation would only improve after switching to a heaven-grade cultivation method. Therefore, it was common to see cultivators fighting in the air in the core region. Luyi wasn't affected at all. He could already control 4 light spirit tools with ease, so what did it matter if he had one more flying spirit tool? With the support of the wind spirit pattern, his figure turned into a stream of light, passing through the fleeing Lightning Brilliance Religion's cultivators. The 4 spirit tools around him shuttled back and forth, reaping the enemy's lives along with miserable screams. After a dozen breaths, he stopped and turned around, blocking the path of the fleeing Lightning Brilliance Religion's cultivators. Boom! A loud noise came from below. Only then did the overturned Lightning Brilliance Religion's ship fall to the ground. Following the loud noise was a burst of fire, and faint screams came from the wreckage of the ship. Of the 300 people from the Lightning Brilliance Religion, only 100 managed to escape. Where were the other 200 people? Naturally, they were on the ship. Some of them didn't have the time to run, but even more of them didn't have the ability to run. How could they have a good ending after falling from a height of nearly 100 feet? It could be said that the Lightning Brilliance Religion had lost 200 cultivators. Let's attack together and kill him. The deputy guardian of the Lightning Brilliance Religion roared. After seeing Luyi's flying speed and killing methods, he knew that if they didn't deal with Luyi, they wouldn't be able to escape. The others from the Heaven Expanse sect might not be able to catch up, but Luyi's speed was too terrifying. It wasn't something they could shake off. The only response he received was a fiery red stream of light that was rapidly expanding in his field of vision. If they were on the ground, no matter how strong Luyi was, he wouldn't dare to block nearly 100 people by himself. It was no different from courting death. However, it was different in the air. None of them had switched to a heaven-grade cultivation technique. Luyi's strength wasn't affected because of his powerful soul and strong control over his spirit chi. However, the people from the Heaven Expanse sect were different. It would be good if they could display 70% of their usual strength. Moreover, when flying, Luyi had more room to maneuver and dodge. Simply put, it was basically impossible for the enemy to hit him, but he was able to kill them one by one. He continued to obstruct and delay the enemy. Soon, the Heaven Expanse sect's cultivators arrived under Zhao Li's lead. Flanking them from the front and back, the Lightning Brilliance Religion's cultivators had no way out. The cultivators of the Bright Lightning Religion displayed their fearless nature as they flew back and forth between their flying artifacts and spells. The battle continued for a while before the fluctuations of spirit power gradually subsided. Previously, when the Clear Wind Sect's station was captured, the two sects had suffered some casualties. However, in this encounter, all of the Lightning Brilliance Religion's cultivators died. Not a single one of the Heaven Expanse sect's cultivators died. Only the tremors from the collision of the two ships caused some of them to suffer minor injuries. After cleaning up the battlefield, Luyi led a few formation cultivators to inspect the Heaven Expanse sect's ship. The ship's bow was damaged and its overall performance was slightly affected, but it wasn't a major problem. They didn't continue forward and instead repaired themselves while waiting for the Azure Billow Mountains cultivators to arrive. The Lightning Brilliance Religion had suffered a disastrous loss of over 300 people. More importantly, with so many people missing, there was no way they could keep their station unless they could request for reinforcements in time. However, the Scarlet Blood Valley that was closest to them was their next target. The Scarlet Blood Valley had no way to support the Lightning Brilliance Religion. Since they couldn't rely on the Scarlet Blood Valley, it was even more unreliable to rely on the Alliance sects that were further away. At this moment, in the Thunder Light sect's encampment, the Thunder Light sect's guardian was Ashen. In less than a dozen breaths of time, more than 300 marks were destroyed in his battlefield imprint. Each mark represented the life of a Thunder Light sect cultivator. Those 300 people were originally sent to support the Clear Wind sect, but later turned to support the Scarlet Blood Valley. No one knew what happened to them, that they were completely annihilated in such a short period of time without a single survivor. Before the 300 disciples died, they didn't even manage to send back a single message. The guardian suppressed his grief and steadied his mind before sending a message to the Scarlet Blood Valley to inquire about the situation. The Scarlet Blood Valley guardian was dumbfounded. They were still waiting for the Lightning Brilliance Religion's reinforcements to defend against the Sky Expanse sect and MT Azure Billow. In the end, the Lightning Brilliance Religion was completely annihilated. The Clear Wind sect was gone and the Lightning Brilliance Religion's reinforcements were all dead. Didn't this mean that they had to fight alone? For a moment, the Scarlet Blood Valley Guardian was under a mountain of pressure. With the Clear Wind sect's example, the Scarlet Blood Valley didn't intend to retreat even though they knew that they couldn't defend their station by themselves. The Clear Wind sect couldn't withstand a single blow because they were caught off guard. As long as the Scarlet Blood Valley was sufficiently prepared, even if they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, they could rely on their geographical advantage to fight the enemy. In this critical situation, the Scarlet Blood Valley began to make preparations. Messages were shuttled back and forth between their station and their sect. The Azure Billow sect's people arrived late and met up with the Sky Expanse sect. The two sects' cultivators once again set off towards the Scarlet Blood Valley station. In the previous battle at the Clear Wind sect's station, the two sects' cultivators had suffered casualties. However, the casualties weren't great, less than 40 people had died. Therefore, it didn't affect their overall strength. When the two sects' cultivators arrived outside the Scarlet Blood Valley station, the Scarlet Blood Valley's side was already waiting in formation. Their formation was the same as when the two sects attacked the Clear Wind sect. The strong body cultivators were at the front, followed by the weapon cultivators and ghost cultivators, and the magic cultivators were at the back. The two sects' cultivators disembarked one after another. With the previous two great victories and the advantage in numbers, both the Sky Expanse sect and MT Azure Billow's cultivators were full of vigor. They glared at the Scarlet Blood Valley's people through a layer of light barrier. There were even people who continuously gestured with their hands on their necks, blatantly threatening them. On the other hand, the Scarlet Blood Valley's side was still nervous even though they had already made proper preparations and were determined to fight to the death with the enemy. Before the battle had even begun, the two sides' cultivators were already cursing each other. Their shouts were extremely feminine. Chapter 327. Lu Yi activated his clear vision spirit pattern to investigate the nodes of Scarlet Blood Valley's Great Formation. Just like before, he began to cooperate with the Formation Cultivators of Heaven Expanse sect. During this time, the cultivators of the two sects were arranged by Zhao Li and Song Yin. Although the guardian of Scarlet Blood Valley's Great Formation had heard of Lu Ye's method of breaking the Great Formation through some channels, he had never seen it with his own eyes. It was only at this moment that he deeply felt what despair was. No matter how he activated the Great Formation, It was difficult to stop Lu Ye's progress. Just as he had heard, in just a few dozen breaths, the spirit qi in a certain area of the Great Formation stopped flowing. Following a round of fierce attacks from the two sects, the Great Formation in that area was completely shattered. The curses of both sides stopped and turned into attacks of artifact manipulation and spell technique. In an instant, multicolored rays of light shuttled back and forth in the air, creating a spectacular scene. Accompanied by miserable screams, the guardian of Scarlet Blood Valley, who was commanding from the rear, discovered that something was wrong. The body cultivators on his side were dying too quickly. Body cultivators were the biggest barrier for their side. If too many of them died, their line of defense would definitely be broken. After a brief observation, he quickly saw the truth. It was Lu Ye of Blue Blood sect. Almost half of the dead body cultivators were killed by him. 4 rays of light from the Imperial equipment danced and shuttled back and forth under his control. The body cultivators targeted by him were simply unable to resist the might of the Imperial equipment. 1 kill, 1 kill. The body cultivators that the Scarlet Blood Valley had painstakingly nurtured were as weak as paper in front of his sharp attacks. In just 10 breaths of time, the number of body cultivators blocking the front line had been reduced by more than half. Without body cultivators blocking the front, the casualties of Scarlet Blood Valley's side soared, and as time passed, the casualties on their side also rapidly increased. On the other hand, although the enemy's body cultivators had also suffered casualties, their tight defensive line had always been firm, especially the body cultivator in the middle. His vitality was simply outrageous. He had seen with his own eyes that the body cultivator's defensive spirit artifact had been destroyed and more than 10 attacks had landed on his body, but this body cultivator didn't seem affected at all. This guy's physical body was even stronger than ordinary defensive spirit artifact. The guardian of Scarlet Blood Valley realized the seriousness of the problem and also knew that he had underestimated his opponent this time. However, it was impossible to escape now. Escaping now would only give the enemy a chance to kill them all. He hurriedly activated the battlefield imprint and sent out a message. In the next moment, 5 figures appeared out of thin air in the Tianji Hall. The 5 of them did not stop as they dashed out of the Tianji Hall, turning into 5 streams of light as they charged toward the battlefield. Among the 5 people, there were men and women, young people and old people. They were obviously not Spirit Stream stage cultivators. Amongst them, there were Cloud River stage cultivators and True Lake stage cultivators. In order to stand up for Lu Yi, Shui Yuan had forced her way into the Spirit Stream battlefield twice. The Scarlet Blood Valley naturally didn't lack the courage to do so. However, the price of doing so was far too great, and the risk involved was far too great. Thus, under normal circumstances, the cultivators of the 9 provinces wouldn't do such a thing. But now that the sect's encampment was in imminent danger, how could the Scarlet Blood Valley care so much? At this moment, the 5 of them were only displaying 8th order heaven-grade cultivations because they had broken through to the Cloud River realm when they were still 8th order heaven-grade cultivators. Now that they had forced their way in, the cultivation they could display was at its peak when they fought in the Spirit Stream battlefield. In this regard, they couldn't compare to Shui Yuan. Shui Yuan had broken through to the Cloud River realm with a 9th order heaven-grade cultivation, so when she entered the Spirit Stream battlefield, her cultivation was at the 9th order heaven grade. It wasn't that the Scarlet Blood Valley didn't want to send out stronger cultivators, but that they didn't have anyone stronger. In the Spirit Stream stage, if one could open 360 apertures and break through to the Cloud River realm with a 9th order heaven grade cultivation, then reaching the Spirit Sea realm in the future would be a certainty. But how could it be so easy to open 360 apertures? Even the disciples of first-grade sects wouldn't dare to say that they could open 360 apertures. Among the Spirit Stream stage cultivators, less than 1 in 100 could break through to the Cloud River realm with a 9th order heaven grade cultivation. The Scarlet Blood Valley was only a 5th-rank sect, and these 5 people were already the most spirit stream realm cultivators that the Scarlet Blood Valley could bring out. Lu Yi immediately sensed the pressure of 5 powerful auras and looked up. When he saw the 5 streams of light, he immediately shouted, "Be careful!" Perhaps his shout had attracted the attention of these people, as the old man among the 5 immediately looked over with a cold, murderous intent flashing in his eyes. With the help of these 5 people, the Scarlet Blood Valley immediately stabilized the situation. On the contrary, the rhythm of the attacks of the 2 sects was disrupted. The originally advantageous situation had turned into a stalemate, and even the casualties had increased greatly. After all, there were 5 8th-order heaven-grade cultivators. The power they could display when working together was enough to turn the tide of the battle. The Scarlet Blood Valley Guardian, who had been worried all this time, breathed a sigh of relief, while Zhao Li and Song Yin were anxious. A moment later, traces of purple lightning began to linger around the 5 people. No matter who it was, all of them showed a pained expression. One of the women's body was trembling slightly, and the power of her attacks had weakened significantly. The 5 of them knew the consequences of killing people in the Spirit Stream battlefield and were mentally prepared before entering. However, knowing was one thing, and none of them had done it before. When they heard that the Palm Seal Master of the Blue Blood sect had started a massacre in the Spirit Stream battlefield, they felt that they were not weaker than him. However, when they killed the first Spirit Stream realm cultivator, they realized that things were not as simple as they thought. The punishment of the soul-extinguishing divine thunder was not easy to resist. Shui Yuan could resist it because of her special soul. Even if she killed dozens of people, she could still do it as if nothing had happened. The 5 from the Scarlet Blood Valley couldn't do it. They had only killed 20 people in total, but they had already reached the limit of their endurance and couldn't kill any more. They could only resist the attacks of the 2 sects. "You guys block him, I'll go kill Lu Yi," the old man said through gritted teeth. His figure flickered as he pounced towards Lu Yi. Because of the intense pain in his soul, his face was distorted. Lu Yi was their main goal this time. As long as they could kill Lu Yi, even if they lost the Scarlet Blood Valley's encampment, the various sects of the Myriad Demon Ridge would compensate them with a large amount of resources, enough for the Scarlet Blood Valley to rebuild their encampment. The old man wielded a long sword and was clearly a weapon cultivator. As he pounced through the air, sword chi slashed towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly pulled out his mountain saber and shattered several of the sword chi. However, his body was sent flying by the huge impact. The old man's killing move instantly arrived. The long sword in his hand was like a snake's tongue as it stabbed towards Lu Ye's heart. This sword was so fast that Lu Yi almost didn't have time to react. Defensive spirit runes formed hastily and barely blocked the attack. However, in the next instant, sword flowers bloomed in his field of vision. The benefits of having a powerful soul were displayed at this moment. Although Lu Yi didn't see the enemy's sword move clearly, several vital points on his body felt a stabbing pain. A great sense of danger surged in his heart, and he instinctively activated several defensive spirit runes to protect those positions. As the defensive spirit runes shattered one after another, Lu Ye's body was covered in blood, but there was no danger to his life. The old man's eyes flashed with surprise. He, an 8th-order heaven-grade master, had come to kill an ordinary 9th-order cultivator, yet he had failed to immediately kill him. This was difficult for him to accept. His figure flickered as he dodged the attacks coming from all directions. The long sword in his hand flickered again as his body merged with the sword chi, almost becoming one as he stabbed towards Lu Yi. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, although he was only able to display the strength of an 8th-order heaven-grade master, he still had the strength of a true lake master. This sword strike alone was something that even a master on the Spirit Stream list might not be able to block. Lu Yi was indeed unable to block it because the speed of this attack was too fast, so fast that it exceeded the limit of his reaction. Even if he activated a defensive spirit rune that was enough to protect most of his body in time, it was still pierced through by the sword. The long sword pierced through from below his heart and came out through his body. If it had only been half a finger away, this sword strike would have taken his life. However, at the most critical moment, Lu Yi had taken a deep breath and avoided a fatal blow. Brother Yi. Zhao Li, who had been paying attention to Lu Ye's movements, turned pale with fright. Song Yin, on the other hand, silently rushed over, wanting to help. However, it was obviously too late. The old man didn't show any joy after succeeding. As long as his enemy didn't die, he wouldn't relax. Pushing his spirit qi madly, he poured it into Lu Ye's body through the long sword in an attempt to destroy his 5 viscera and 6 organs. This move was similar to how Lu Yi had activated his Grand Thorn Spirit Rune after piercing through his enemy. Normally, a piercing wound wouldn't be fatal, but it was more suitable for him to use small tricks that could cause follow-up damage. Lu Yi felt intense pain as his flesh and blood squirmed around his wounds. The mountain blade in his hand almost burst into flames as a fiery red spirit qi wrapped around it. As he waved his long sword, a halo of light flashed as he stared at the old man in front of him and slashed down. The old man frowned and gave up on his original plan, pulling his long sword out of Lu Ye's body and holding it horizontally in front of him. Clanging sounds rang out and sparks flew everywhere. A ray of light flashed across the Pan Mountain saber. It was a double-pressure spiritual tattoo that Lu Yi had inlaid with the Tao of spiritual tattoo. The old man's victorious expression turned into one of astonishment because in that instant, the blow from the young man in front of him was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. It didn't feel like a blade was chopping down, but more like a small mountain. Caught off guard, the old man's long sword almost flew out of his hand. As a weapon cultivator, he naturally wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. He hurriedly urged his spirit qi to stabilize the weapon in his hand. Under the immense pressure, he and Lu Yi fell to the ground together, their weapons resisting each other as they stared at each other. The old man's expression was calm as he coldly looked at Lu Yi. It was undeniable that the young man's performance was outstanding. Even as a true lake stage expert, he couldn't find any flaws. However, the difference in strength was still there. Since he wanted to kill Lu Yi, no matter what the young man did, it would be a futile struggle. Then, he saw a sun explode in his field of vision. Chapter 328. Lu Yi generally wouldn't activate the Sunshine Spirit Tattoo. When he obtained this spirit tattoo, he felt that it was a very strange thing. It was useless, but it was actually somewhat useful. This spirit tattoo was only suitable for activation under some special circumstances. For example, at this moment. Due to the influence of the heavy-pressure spirit tattoo, the long sword in the old man's hand and Lu Ye's mountain-coiling saber were facing each other. What did it feel like to see a sun explode right in front of your eyes? Lu Yi didn't know, because he had closed his eyes the moment he activated the spirit tattoo. He was afraid that he would go blind. The old man from the Scarlet Blood Valley wasn't so lucky. Although he quickly closed his eyes when he sensed that something was wrong, it was still too late. At this time, he only saw yellow, blue, purple, and red colors constantly changing in front of his eyes. His eyes stung and tears flowed out. That feeling was as if someone had fiercely slapped his eyeballs. The battle between spiritual tattooists was so weird and changeable. No one knew what kind of strange spiritual tattoos a spiritual tattooist would use in the next moment. Recently, because Lu Yi showed his ability to break the formation, everyone subconsciously ignored the fact that he had obtained the inheritance of spiritual tattooists. But then again, it was useless even if they remembered. In a battle with a spirit tattoo master, reaction speed was the most important. Lu Yi took the opportunity to attack with his saber. However, a true Lake Realm cultivator was worthy of being called a true Lake Realm cultivator. Even with his eyes closed, his perception was unbelievably strong. He waved the long sword in his hand and blocked all of Lu Ye's attacks. The last time Lu Yi activated the Sunshine Spirit Tattoo was when he first entered the inner circle and encountered the Sky Pillar Sect's 9th Order cultivator named Yuan Guang. At that time, he was a 7th Order cultivator. After he activated the Sunshine Spirit Tattoo, Yi, who was already prepared, summoned the 9 Worlds diagram and took him and Yuan Guang into it for a life and death battle. The scene this time was very similar to the last time. Yi had been following Lu Yi closely, never leaving within 10 meters of him. Anyway, she was a Dharma cultivator, so her attack range was very far. Standing beside Lu Yi, she could kill the enemy. When Lu Yi was targeted by the old man from the Scarlet Blood Valley, Yi wanted to help, but she knew that even if she did, she wouldn't be of much use, so she had been looking for an opportunity. It was only when the Sunshine Spirit rune exploded that she understood Lu Yi's plan. At this moment, she leaped into the air and flew towards the location where Lu Yi and the old man were falling. She opened the 9 Realms diagram and fiercely swung it upward. The old man instinctively felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't see at the moment, so he didn't know what was going on. He was almost defenseless when Yi took him into the 9-world map. Yi leaped into the distance, avoiding the chaotic battlefield. Hupo followed closely behind to protect her. Then, she spread out the 9 worlds painting in front of her. Looking at the 2 figures in the painting, she channeled her spiritual energy into the spirit treasure. In the rocky forest that was only a few li in circumference, yellow sand danced in the air. Lu Yi's figure was like a dancing butterfly. With the support of the wind spirit pattern, he launched rapid and fierce attacks at the old man from the Scarlet Blood Valley from all directions. If his attack failed, he would immediately retreat and look for another opportunity. Ding ding dang dang sounds could be heard continuously. The old man's vision had not yet recovered. Crouching slightly, the long sword in his hand pointed diagonally to the ground, occasionally sending out a sword strike, each one of which was able to resolve Lu Yi's attack. An 8th Order Heaven-grade cultivator wouldn't have such powerful ability, but a true Lake Realm Master's heritage gave the old man such an ability. However, what made the old man feel a little uneasy was that the commotion around him had suddenly disappeared for some reason. It was as if he and Lu Yi were the only ones left in the world. As Lu Yi rushed forward again, the old man tilted his head slightly and pushed his perception to the limit, raising the long sword in his hand again and pointing it in a certain direction. However, this time, the space around the old man suddenly tightened, as if the surrounding space had solidified, causing the old man's movement to slow down. The old man's expression changed greatly, and in the next moment, through his blurred vision, he saw Lu Yi arrive in front of him and slash down with his sword. The old man's body was sent flying, a huge wound stretching from his shoulder to his lower abdomen. Blood gushed out from the wound. Before the old man could land, Lu Yi raised his hand and sent out 4 streams of light towards him. These 4 streams of light rotated back and forth, like a spinning top, before slamming into the old man. At this moment of life and death, the old man's long sword flicked out several times and a series of clanging sounds rang out as the 4 streams of light were sent flying. Before the old man could breathe a sigh of relief, Lu Yi's figure had arrived. Outside the 9 worlds picture, Yi's face was slightly pale as she madly poured her spiritual energy into this spirit artifact. When Lu Yi first entered the inner circle, Yi could only maintain the operation of the 9 worlds picture, and this was under the premise that Madame Yun had sealed 90% of its power. Other than maintaining the operation of this spirit artifact, Yi couldn't do anything else. But now it was different as Yi could slightly stimulate the power of this spirit artifact. Just now, the space around the old man had suddenly solidified, causing him to reveal a flaw in his defense. This was Yi's doing. It could be said that although the old man seemed to be fighting Lu Yi alone, in fact, Lu Yi had Yi as his secret helper. This helper's effect was the most fatal. The old man could defend against Lu Yi's methods, but Yi's actions were completely undetectable and untouchable. A moment later, in the Nine Worlds picture, the old man gasped for breath. There weren't many injuries on his body, only 3. However, these 3 wounds were all extremely serious. The most serious one was the one that pierced through his right lung. This wound alone wasn't considered serious, but the instant Lu Ye's blade pierced through, the damage caused by the spikes was terrifying. The old man's panting at this moment was like an old bellows being pumped. He staggered to his feet, and through his blurry vision, he saw the youth's silhouette in front of him walk step by step toward him, stopping 3 feet in front of him. Even at this point, the old man didn't intend to sit still and wait for death. Using the last of his strength, spiritual energy surged around him as he stabbed forward with his sword. At the same time, Lu Yi rushed forward, fiery red spiritual energy clinging to his mountain pan saber. The 2 figures crossed each other. Lu Yi shook off the bloodstains on his saber and slowly returned it to its sheath. The sound of someone falling to the ground came from behind him. Most cultivators of the 9 continents, whether they were from the myriad Devil Ridge or the Grand Heaven Alliance, had a common problem, and that was that they didn't speak much. The higher their cultivation, the more obvious it was. This was the result of the constant confrontation between the 2 factions. Because no matter which side was defeated by the other, if they didn't have the chance to escape, it was basically impossible for them to survive. Begging for mercy was useless. The old man's lower body was dyed red with blood. His eyes were wide open, filled with confusion and unwillingness. To think that he, a powerful true lake stage cultivator, had forced his way into the Spirit Stream battlefield to eliminate Lu Yi for the sect and the myriad Devil Ridge, but in the end, he died at Lu Ye's hands. He died with his eyes wide open. A dark red, almost pitch-black light floated out of the old man's corpse and landed on the back of Lu Ye's hand. This was the first time Lu Yi saw a light of this color. In the past, when he killed enemies, it was basically red light, and the brightness of the color was not much different. The change in the light was clearly due to the old man's true lake stage cultivation. Even if he could only use Tianba's strength in the Spirit Stream battlefield, it didn't change the fact that he was a true lake stage cultivator. It was unknown how many levels higher he had killed enemies. Lu Yi checked his merit points and found that his merit points had increased by about 700 to 800 points. High-level cultivators couldn't do as they pleased when they forced their way into the Spirit Stream battlefield. The balance and suppression of Heaven's secrets made them only able to display the peak strength of a Spirit Stream stage cultivator. Moreover, every time they killed someone, they would be punished by the soul-extinguishing god Thunder. The more they killed, the more severe the punishment. Normally, high-level cultivators wouldn't casually enter the Spirit Stream battlefield because the price they had to pay was too high. This time, the Scarlet Blood Valley was clearly forced into a corner. Their encampment was about to be captured, and external help couldn't arrive in time. They could only rely on the high-level cultivators of the sect. However, the strongest old man was still killed by Lu Yi and Yi with the help of the Nine Worlds map. If this spread out, the Scarlet Blood Valley would definitely become a laughingstock. Within the Nine Worlds map, Lu Yi hurriedly bandaged his wounds and put away the old man's sword. He didn't see a storage bag, but he didn't know if the old man didn't have one on him or if he didn't need one. It was most likely the latter. For example, the head teacher and senior apprentice sister Shui Yuan didn't have storage bags. They had their own methods of storing things. He raised his hand and grabbed the old man's mangled corpse. The scene in front of him quickly changed, and the noise of battle entered his ears once more. Lu Yi looked up and saw that the battle was in full swing. Originally, the Scarlet Blood Valley had already suffered many casualties and wouldn't be able to defend their encampment no matter what. But as several Scarlet Blood Valley powerhouses rushed in, they barely managed to stabilize the situation. As Lu Yi and the old man fought, the situation in the Scarlet Blood Valley became worse. The main reason was that the four powerhouses didn't dare to casually kill people anymore. All they could do now was passively resist the attacks of the two sects' cultivators. The cultivators of the two sects clearly saw this, and their attacks became more and more unrestrained, causing the four powerhouses to become extremely angry. They were waiting for the old man to kill Lu Yi. That way, even if they lost their encampment, it wouldn't matter. However, they were destined not to be able to wait. Lu Ye's wings unfurled, and he soared into the sky, flying to the place where the two sides were fighting and throwing the corpse in his hand down. The old man's tattered corpse fell to the ground, causing a large splash of blood to splash out. The noisy battlefield suddenly quieted down for a moment, followed by incredulous exclamations one after another. Third Elder! One of the experts from the Scarlet Blood Valley stared at the corpse in front of him, his eyes trembling violently. When he raised his head again, he saw Lu Yi of the Jade Blood sect hovering in the air, a pair of fiery red wings gently flapping behind his back. His upper body was bandaged with blood, and his eyes were filled with endless coldness as he looked down from above. The third elder was dead. No one knew how he had died. There were too many things happening on this chaotic battlefield, and all of them were focused on dealing with the enemy in front of them. They only knew that the third elder had gone out to find Lu Yi, but a moment later, his corpse had been thrown back. Chapter 329. The Scarlet Blood Valley was a 5th-grade sect, and there were no Divine Ocean Realm cultivators in the sect. The strongest cultivator in the sect was in the True Lake Realm. This third elder's strength was one of the top True Lake Realm cultivators in the Scarlet Blood Valley. But at this moment, his tattered corpse was thrown down from the sky like a piece of trash. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the Scarlet Blood Valley's morale, especially when they were already at a disadvantage. If Lu Yi could kill the third elder, he naturally had the ability to kill the remaining four. A huge sense of danger shrouded the four. Without any hesitation, a woman shouted, "Let's go!" With this order, the Scarlet Blood Valley cultivators fought and retreated, fleeing towards the Tianji Hall. The cultivators of the Sky Expanse sect and the Azure Billow Mountain chased after them relentlessly. Along the way, corpses kept falling. When the Scarlet Blood Valley cultivators retreated into the Tianji Hall, dozens more died. The Scarlet Blood Valley cultivators who retreated to the Tianji Hall used the Tianji Pillar to retreat back to the main sects of the 9 prefectures. As the number of people decreased, the resistance continued to weaken. At a certain moment, the cultivators of the 2 sects rushed into the Tianji Hall like a flood. The Scarlet Blood Valley cultivators who did not manage to escape in time had no way out. Even the woman who gave the order was forced to stay behind, because she was in charge of bringing up the rear. The woman used all her strength to kill several people. Purple lightning surged on her body, causing her to scream in pain. The cultivators of the 2 sects swarmed forward. After a while, the battle calmed down. There was no cheering or jumping for joy. This was the second Myriad Devil Ridge encampment that the cultivators of the 2 sects joined hands to attack. Compared to the previous time, the number of deaths this time was undoubtedly much greater. The process was the same: cleaning up the battlefield and collecting the spoils of war. On the plaza of the Tianji Hall, Lu Yi sat cross-legged as an accompanying medical cultivator treated his injuries. The injuries were left behind by the elder from the Scarlet Blood Valley. Although Lu Yi hurriedly bandaged them, they were not of much use. Under the treatment of the medical cultivator, the wounds became itchy. Although his physique was not as strong as Zhu Jia, it was not inferior to a body cultivator of the same level. In fact, it was even stronger. This was naturally due to the scale he obtained from the Dragon Spring. The advantage of a strong physique was that injuries recovered quickly, especially when there was a medical cultivator treating him. Zhao Li and Song Yin came together to check on Lu Ye's injuries. After confirming that there were no major problems, they finally relaxed. While the cultivators of the 2 sects were busy here, the news of the Scarlet Blood Valley's encampment being captured quickly spread out again. After the Cool Breeze sect's encampment had been captured, the entire Spirit Stream battlefield, and even the cultivators of the 9 regions, had focused their attention on the 2 sects led by Lu Yi, constantly paying attention to their movements and the situation of the battle. Therefore, in less than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea after the Scarlet Blood Valley's encampment was captured, the matter had already caused a huge uproar, and almost everyone knew about it. What shocked everyone was that not only did the Scarlet Blood Valley lose their encampment, they even lost 2 true lake stage experts. It was said that in order to protect their base, the Scarlet Blood Valley had sent 5 powerhouses who had surpassed the Spirit Stream realm to force their way into the Spirit Stream battlefield, hoping to imitate the actions of the Jade Blood Sect's Palm Seal Master. As a result, 2 of the 5 people died, and the remaining 3 fled back to the 9 regions. At this moment, they were tormented by the soul-extinguishing divine thunder. That's right, even though the 3 of them had left the Spirit Stream battlefield, the punishment of the soul-extinguishing divine thunder had not disappeared. Instead, it was still there, and depending on how many people they killed in the Spirit Stream battlefield, the duration of the punishment would vary. One could imagine that in the next 1 or 2 months, these 3 people would probably live a life worse than death. This was also the reason why the powerful cultivators of the 9 regions were unwilling to enter the Spirit Stream battlefield so easily. The punishment of Heaven's Secret was simply too strong. Among the 2 people who died in the Scarlet Blood Valley, even the true Lake Stage 3rd Elder was killed. When the news spread, the 9 regions went into an uproar. Compared to the Scarlet Blood Valley losing their encampment, the death of 2 true Lake Stage cultivators in the Spirit Stream battlefield was even more shocking. It had been many years since a cultivator above the Spirit Stream realm died in the Spirit Stream battlefield, not to mention 2 true Lake Stage cultivators. News after news spread in the direction of the Scarlet Blood Valley. There were even Spirit Sea Stage cultivators from the Myriad Demon's Ridge, who personally came to the Scarlet Blood Valley to inquire about the situation. In the end, they found out that the 3rd Elder was going to kill the Blue Blood Sect's Luia, but for some unknown reason, he was killed by Luia instead. Not only did he lose his own life, he also caused the Scarlet Blood Valley to lose a lot of face. As for Luia, he was only an ordinary 9th Order cultivator. For an ordinary 9th Order cultivator to kill Tianba, even if it was Luia who shone brilliantly at the Golden Light Summit, it was impossible for him to do so. Not to mention, this Tianba was a true Lake Stage cultivator. Something must have happened that the Scarlet Blood Valley didn't pay attention to, and that was the reason why a true Lake Stage cultivator was killed. But as for what exactly happened, no one knew. At that time, EE activated the 9 Worlds diagram to take Luia and the 3rd Elder into it, then left the battlefield with the 9 Worlds diagram. This caused the Scarlet Blood Valley to be unable to see what happened. With the Clear Wind Sect and Scarlet Blood Valley's encampment gone, the Thunderlight Temple's turn would be next. For a moment, all eyes gathered on the Thunderlight Temple. But after asking around, they found out that the Thunderlight Temple's cultivators had already withdrawn from their encampment and returned to their main sect in the 9 State. They had no choice but to withdraw. Over 300 people from the Thunderlight Temple had been killed by the Heaven Expanse sect on their way to reinforce the Scarlet Blood Valley. There were only 100 or so people left to defend their encampment. How could they have the strength to resist? So when Lu Yi led the 2 sects cultivators to the Thunderlight Temple's encampment, it was already empty. Even the sect defending Array's base had been dug out and taken away by the Thunderlight Temple's cultivators. They were gone, but the Heaven's Fate Pillar couldn't escape. The various blessings on the Heaven's Fate Pillar couldn't escape either. Zhao Li and Song Yin happily went to divide the various blessings on the Heaven's Fate Pillar, while Lu Yi continued to heal his wounds. Since Lu Yi came out of seclusion, the group of several hundred cultivators took only 3 or 4 days to break through the encampments of 3 sects in Myriad Devil Ridge. Such a terrifying record was unprecedented. Even when Lu Yi led the Hidden God Palace and the Cloud High Palace, he only managed to break through 2 encampments. Before setting off from the Heaven Expanse sect, Lu Yi fulfilled his promise to Bai Qian. The Heaven Expanse sect took over 70% of the blessings on the Heaven's Fate pillars. Even if they suffered a lot of losses during the plundering, it was enough to make up for the loss of the Heaven Expanse sect's encampment. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, both the Heaven Expanse sect and the Azure Billow Mountain weren't having a good time. This was especially true for the Heaven Expanse sect, which was surrounded by the 3 myriad Devil Ridge forces in a triangular formation. When the sect's disciples went out, they didn't feel safe and would often be ambushed by the enemy. But now, the 3 myriad Devil Ridge forces had been crippled. Each of them had suffered heavy casualties. It would take them at least 8 to 10 years to fully recover. If the Heaven Expanse sect and the Azure Billow Mountain joined forces to suppress them, it would take even longer. After dividing the blessings on the Heaven's Fate pillar, Zhao Li and Song Yin went to find Lu Yi, who was recuperating. After asking for his opinion, they decided to withdraw to the Azure Billow Mountain encampment. In a flash, 2 large ships rose into the air and headed in the direction of the Azure Billow Mountain encampment. When they arrived at the Azure Billow Mountain encampment, they were warmly welcomed by the cultivators left behind. On the way back, Song Yin had already ordered the Azure Billow Mountain to prepare a celebratory banquet. That night, nearly 1,000 cultivators gathered at the Azure Billow Mountain encampment. The celebratory banquet was held in the Heaven's Fate Hall Square. Everyone ate heartily, toasted, and ate. It was extremely lively. If Lu Yi hadn't declined with the excuse of being injured, he would definitely have been drunk by the enthusiastic cultivators of the 2 sections. The next day, while Lu Yi was still washing up, Zhao Li and Song Yin had already arrived. They had the 2 sit down and Yi served them tea. Lu Yi tidied himself up and came to see them. After sitting down, Zhao Li asked a thought-provoking question. "Brother Yi, what do you plan to do next?" Song Yin also looked at him expectantly, no longer as mature and prudent as before. Lu Yi took a sip of tea and asked, "What plans do you have, Brother Zhao?" Zhao Li chuckled. "What plans could I have? If Brother Yi has any plans, my Heaven Expanse sect will naturally be willing to follow you. In any case, the matter of rebuilding the encampment isn't urgent." There was a hidden meaning in his words. It was obvious that he was hungry for more. For so many years on the Spirit Stream battlefield, no one had a very good method to break the defensive formation. If one wanted to take over a sect's encampment, they had to rely on absolute suppression of numbers. Thus, for all this time, whether it was the Grand Heaven Alliance or the Myriad Devil Ridge, although they wanted nothing more than to take over their neighbors' encampments, they really didn't have the ability. Now it was different. The Spirit Stream battlefield had produced Lu Yi, who broke the defensive formation as easily as eating and drinking. After using all kinds of methods to break the formation, the defensive formation was as fragile as paper. Zhao Li saw an opportunity and tasted the sweetness of it. Naturally, he hoped that this kind of thing would happen as often as possible. What was the big deal about breaking 3 myriad Devil Ridge encampments? It would be best if he could break 30, or even 300. Although Song Yin didn't say anything, it was obvious that he had the same idea as Zhao Li from the fact that he came with him. "Many people have contacted you, right?" Zhao Li and Song Yin looked at each other and didn't hide anything. Song Yin said, "Since last night, many people have been contacting me. After learning that Brother Ye is temporarily staying here, they all want to come and visit." The visit was fake. They wanted to ask Lu Yi for help. As long as they could get Lu Ye's help, any sect could take over their neighbor's encampment. Zhao Li and Song Yin weren't the only ones contacted by many people. Many people also contacted Lu Yi himself. Some even contacted Hua Ci. To the Myriad Devil Ridge, the destruction of the Clear Wind sect, Scarlet Blood Valley, and Thunder Light sect's encampments was a tragedy. However, to the Grand Heaven Alliance's camp, this was great news. In the past night, the news that spread between the 2 camps was like snowflakes falling in the cold winter. There were countless of them. At present, some of the Grand Heaven Alliance's guardian envoys were already rushing towards Kanglan Mountain's encampment. They would probably arrive in less than half a day. In one night, the Jade Blood Sect's Lu Ye became a hot commodity in the entire Grand Heaven Alliance. Everyone wanted to get close to him. Without Brother Ye's permission, I don't dare to casually reply to others. That's why I came to ask Brother Ye's opinion. Let them all come. Zhao Li and Song Yin were overjoyed to hear this reply. Chapter 330. It was said that the rafters that stuck out would rot first. Lu Yi had already taken the lead and displayed his terrifying array formation skills. No matter what he chose next, the myriad Devil Ridge would definitely not let him off. For example, he had just arrived at the Sky Expanse Sect's encampment when he was poisoned by a spy from the myriad Devil Ridge. Since the myriad Devil Ridge had targeted him, there was naturally no need for him to shrink back and endure. Moreover, he had entered the inner circle to take revenge. Previously, the progress of taking revenge one by one was too slow. Since the situation had developed like this, he might as well go all out and do something big. A few days ago, when Lu Yi set off from the Sky Expanse Sect, he had a vague premonition of this moment, so he was not surprised. It could even be said that this was what he wanted to see. This was because he needed a lot of merit points. If he did not attack and occupy the myriad Devil Ridge's encampment, where would he get so many merit points? After receiving Lu Ye's affirmative answer, Zhao Li was the first to express that the Sky Expanse Sect would fully support him. Anyway, their encampment had been occupied for more than 2 months. They were the kind of people who had nothing to lose and were not afraid of wearing shoes. Hundreds of cultivators came in a mighty manner and left in a very relaxed manner. This was the first time he discovered that there were actually such benefits to having an encampment occupied. A moment later, Zhao Li and Song Yin bid farewell and left. Since Lu Yi had already expressed his attitude, they had no more worries. At noon, the first guest arrived at the MT Azure Billow encampment. At night, 4 or 5 more people arrived one after another, and there were more on the way. With Song Yin's introduction, Lu Yi met with these people and discussed in the secret room for a long time before they left together. After a short period of peace, 2 ships took off from the MT Azure Billow encampment and sped in the same direction. When the news spread, the myriad Devil Ridge was both terrified and furious. The thing they were most worried about had happened. After leading the 2 sects to attack 3 myriad Devil Ridge forces, Lu Ye was obviously not going to stop. Instead, he was going to continue acting so wantonly. In the face of such an almost unsolvable method, the myriad Devil Ridge was really helpless. For a moment, the myriad Demon Ridge forces near MT Azure Billow panicked because they would definitely be attacked first. However, no one knew which force would be attacked first. This made it impossible for them to make an accurate and effective response. More than half a day later, news came that a sect named Quiet Mountain Gate had become the target of the attack. It wasn't only because Lu Ye's 2 ships were heading in that direction, but also because cultivators from the Azure Gate were gathering here. The Upper Verdant sect and the Quiet Mountain sect were hostile to each other. They were neighbors and were not far away from the Mount Songlan. The 2 sects had a lot of conflicts in the past and had a lot of grudges against each other. Unfortunately, neither of them could do anything to the other. When the 2 ships of Hautian Alliance arrived at the city, the guardian of Quiet Mountain School almost fainted. However, something strange happened. The 2 ships just floated 5 kilometers away and didn't do anything else. Even the nearby cultivators of the Upper Verdant sect were waiting there quietly. After a short while, another piece of news came. The base of another myriad Devil Ridge force called the Profound Underworld sect, which wasn't far from the Quiet Mountain sect, had been attacked. Many cultivators were killed or injured. Even the guardian of the Profound Underworld sect had died in that battle. Only then did the Quiet Mountain sect realize that the 2 ships were just a cover. The cultivators of the 2 sects led by Lu Yi didn't come at all. Instead, they went to attack the profound underworld sect with the help of another Hautian alliance sect. This could be said to have caught the profound underworld sect off guard. It was a false alarm for the quiet mountain sect. However, before they could breathe a sigh of relief, what was supposed to come finally came. On the second day after the profound underworld sect's base was attacked, the Hautian alliance arrived outside the quiet mountain sect's formation. Seeing this, the guardian of the quiet mountain sect didn't hesitate at all. He immediately ordered his disciples to retreat to the land of the Nine States. He didn't dare to confront the enemy at all. Even though his order was decisive, it still took some time for hundreds of people to retreat to the land of the Nine States. After Lu Yi broke the formation, the cultivators of the Hautian alliance joined forces and attacked. They still caused dozens of casualties to the Quiet Mountain sect. After attacking the Quiet Mountain sect's base, the number of cultivators of the Hautian alliance led by Lu Yi had increased to 4. The main force was still the Tian Yen sect. The Tian Yen sect didn't have a base, so they didn't have any worries. All the cultivators that could be mobilized followed Lu Yi. The second force was the Mount Songlan. The Mount Songlan had fewer people. They only had about 200 people. Most of them stayed behind to guard the base. As for the Upper Verdant sect and the other Hautian alliance, they only had about 100 people. They also wanted to send out more people because the more people they sent out, the more benefits they could get after capturing the encampment. Based on the current situation, capturing the Myriad Demons Ridge encampment would become a common occurrence in the future. Lu Yi didn't let them mobilize too many people. It wasn't only because they needed people to guard the base, but also because they needed them to suppress the forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge whose bases were attacked. Take the Quiet Mountain sect as an example. Although the base of the Myriad Devil Ridge was attacked, there weren't many casualties. Only a few dozen people died. If no one suppressed them, these people would definitely think of ways to take revenge. If there was only one force of the Myriad Devil Ridge, the Hautian alliance led by Lu Yi could ignore it. However, what if there were 10 or 20 forces? They were in the same situation as the Tian Yen sect. Their base was attacked, but they didn't have any worries. They only had hatred burning in their hearts. Each of them could mobilize at least 500 people. 10 forces would be 5,000. 20 forces would be 10,000. Once these people gathered together, not only would the alliance be in trouble, even the entire Hautian alliance would find it difficult to deal with them. Therefore, it was very necessary to leave enough people behind. Only in this way could the Myriad Devil Ridge not gather Lin San's forces. Only in this way could the alliance not have to worry about the danger from the rear. The alliance of the 4 sects had about 1,000 people. With such a force and Lu Ye's methods, it was enough to attack any base of the inner circle. Not to mention, when attacking the Myriad Demons Ridge, the neighbors of the target would not be idle. They would definitely lend a helping hand. These neighbors would not be soft-hearted. At the very least, they would be able to mobilize 300 to 400 people. That night, another force of the Myriad Devil Ridge was attacked. On the third day, the 4th force of the Myriad Devil Ridge was attacked. A funny scene appeared. Wherever the Hautian alliance passed, the forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge all retreated. Once they became the target of attack, those forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge would retreat to the 9 prefectures in the shortest time possible. Then, they would take everything they could and destroy everything they couldn't. The Myriad Devil Ridge had no other choice. Although it was shameful to give up the base of the Myriad Devil Ridge without fighting, it was better than sending them to their deaths. After that, 1 or 2 forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge were attacked every day. Every time the base of a force of the Myriad Devil Ridge was attacked, the alliance's strength would increase by a little. This was because cultivators of the Hautian alliance were constantly joining in. There were rogue cultivators and more of them came from the nearby Hautian alliance sections. Lu Yi didn't reject these Hautian alliance sects who wanted to join in. This was because the more people there were, the better. Although they needed to share some of the benefits, they also needed to contribute. What Lu Yi needed them to do was the same as the mission he had given to the Shangqing sect, which was to suppress the forces of the myriad Devil Ridge, whose bases were attacked. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Lu Yi had adhered to a principle. Every new Haotian Alliance sect that joined the alliance would send no more than 100 people. Even so, the number of people in the alliance continued to expand. In just 10 days, the alliance had expanded to 3,000 people. There were also as many as 8 fleets in the sky. An unprecedented chaos took place in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Wherever the alliance passed, the myriad Devil Ridge's bases were destroyed. Basically, they gave up their bases without any resistance. There were also some stubborn forces of the myriad Devil Ridge who wanted to resist, but Lu Yi broke the formation in just a few dozen breaths. By the time the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators realized that something was wrong and wanted to escape, it was already too late. The scene of thousands of cultivators pouring into a sect's base through the huge gap in the formation was spectacular. However, to the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge, this was definitely not a good experience. With such a lesson in the past, the myriad Devil Ridge didn't dare to fight a hopeless battle. No matter which force, once they knew that they would be the target of attack, they would immediately give up their base. Even if the alliance was still a few hundred miles away, behind the alliance, the forces of the myriad Devil Ridge who had lost their base were filled with anger. They wanted to take revenge. However, when they returned to their base from the 9 states, what awaited them was constant harassment and attacks from their neighbors. They were exhausted from dealing with them. The disadvantage of not having a protective formation in the base was revealed. The cultivators of the Grand Heaven Alliance could come and go as they pleased. If they dared to chase after them, there would definitely be an ambush. Even if they had the upper hand, the people of the Grand Heaven Alliance could still retreat to their base and defend with the protective formation. Lu Ye's previous deployment was effective. If he hadn't asked the sects of the Grand Heaven Alliance to suppress the forces of the myriad Devil Ridge, there would definitely be a large group of enemies chasing after the alliance. As the bases of the myriad Devil Ridge forces were attacked and occupied, the title of Sect Exterminating Leaf spread like wildfire. No one knew where this title came from. It was most likely a flattery from the myriad Devil Ridge, because Lu Yi was only there to break the protective formation. It had nothing to do with the matter of sect exterminating. Even if all the Spirit Stream Realm cultivators in the myriad Devil Ridge's base were killed, the sect was still far from being exterminated. However, when this title was spread, it was unanimously acknowledged by the Grand Heaven Alliance. This made Lu Yi very helpless. Back then, when he set off from the Azure Cloud Mountain and passed by the Profound Sect, he had also received the nickname of Tiger Crossing Mountain. Now, Tiger Crossing Mountain had become the Sect Exterminating Leaf. In just half a month, the situation had developed to an uncontrollable level. Countless sects of the Grand Heaven Alliance were looking forward to the arrival of Lu Ye's Alliance army. They were waiting for Lu Yi to lead the Alliance army to their territory so that they could teach their neighbors, who had a grudge against them, a lesson. Chapter 331. Now that they thought about it, when Lu Ye's identity was exposed when he was at the Fifth Order Spirit Stream Realm, Grand Heaven Alliance's countless sects had made a wise move to escort him. If they hadn't done that, Lu Yi would have died long ago. How could Grand Heaven Alliance's morale be so high today? It could be said that everything was predestined. Looking back now, Lu Ye's actions seemed to be repaying a debt of gratitude for what had happened in the past. While many Grand Heaven Alliance masters were sighing with emotion, the various sects in Myriad Demon Ridge's camp were worried. If you looked at the Spirit Stream battlefield and compared the forces of the two factions together, they would be like two dragons on a chessboard. In the past, these two dragons had won and lost, and could be said to be evenly matched, with neither side able to do anything to the other. However, now it seemed that in a certain area of the inner circle, the dragon's spine that belonged to Myriad Demon Ridge had been broken. The encampments that were breached one by one were like broken bones. Not only were there grade 5 and grade 6 sects, but there were also many grade 4 sects near the core of the encampment. This made the Wanmo Ridge feel pain in their hearts. There weren't many casualties in these encampments because they had already retreated when they saw Grand Heaven Alliance's army coming. They didn't dare to confront them head-on. However, the blessing on the Heaven's Fate pillar was gone. It was the result of generations of hard work. What made them even angrier was that Lu Ye didn't show any signs of stopping. He wanted to continue like this. Grand Heaven Alliance was about to succeed. If they didn't think of a way, the Grand Heaven Alliance army led by Lu Ye would conquer all the encampments of Myriad Demon Ridge's forces in the inner circle in a few months. By then, even the core circle wouldn't be safe. At this moment, Myriad Demon Ridge deeply felt the horror of having an entire battlefield dominated by one person. This was something that had never happened in history. The flames of war ignited in Sky Expanse Sect and Azure Billow Mountain. It was like a prairie fire. Many Spirit Sea Realm cultivators from Myriad Demon Ridge gathered for an emergency meeting. Soon, they came up with a solution. The full moon hung in the sky. The Alliance army set up camp in the wilderness. There were more than 5,000 people in the Alliance army. Along the way, the Alliance army had conquered dozens of Myriad Demon Ridge encampments. None of the sects could accommodate so many people, so a few days ago, the Alliance army began to set up camp in the wild to recuperate. Tents of various sizes were scattered throughout the valley, and the largest tent in the center was brightly lit. Led by Lu Yi, more than a dozen Guardian envoys were gathered together to discuss the next attack plan. After a short while, the decision was made and everyone dispersed. Only Lu Yi and Giant Armor, who was meditating, were left in the tent. The only other person left was Hu Po, who was sleeping soundly. As the night deepened, the noise in the surroundings slowly subsided. Only the sound of the patrolling cultivators could be heard moving back and forth. Under the moonlight, several figures quietly approached the tent where Lu Yi was located, all of them not revealing the slightest aura. Even if one looked at their position with the naked eye, one would not be able to see any flaws. These people were clearly ghost cultivators with extremely high cultivation bases. The fact that they were able to infiltrate this place without being detected by the patrolling cultivators undoubtedly meant that there was something wrong with them. The current situation on the Spirit Stream battlefield was far too unfavorable for the Myriad Demon Ridge, and the root of all this was Lu Yi. As long as they could get rid of him, the Myriad Demon Ridge's predicament would be resolved. This was the most effective and direct method. These ghost cultivators were selected from the top sects of the Myriad Devil Ridge. They could be said to be the strongest ghost cultivators that the Myriad Devil Ridge could produce. They had high hopes for them. Attacking Lu Yi in the middle of a military camp of more than 5,000 soldiers, even if they succeeded in the end, the chances of these ghost cultivators surviving were not high. But when they received this mission, they didn't complain at all. From the standpoint of the Myriad Devil Ridge, Lu Yi of the Jade Blood Sect was the true source of evil on the Spirit Stream battlefield. Because of him, dozens of Myriad Devil Ridge forces had already lost their bases, and tens of thousands of miles of land had been dragged into the flames of war. If he did not die, the Myriad Devil Ridge forces in the inner circle would probably be plowed by his army. There were no cultivators guarding outside Lu Yi's tent, which made the ghost cultivators feel a little uneasy. Thinking about it from another perspective, if the Myriad Demon Ridge had a character like Lu Yi, then the Alliance would have to ensure his safety no matter what. His tent would definitely be heavily guarded. But the tent in front of them was completely unguarded. Looking at the tent, the ghost cultivators faintly felt that this might be a trap. But things had already come to this point. Even if it was a trap, they had to give it a try. They were all powerful ghost cultivators. As long as they could enter the tent, they could join forces and attack Lu Yi together. As for what would happen to them after killing Lu Yi, it was no longer within the scope of their consideration. Time passed. The ghost cultivators lay in wait quietly, without the slightest impatience. There were constantly patrolling cultivators going back and forth. There were even cultivators flying above to check the surroundings, but no one could see their whereabouts. The difference in cultivation was obvious. If these ghost cultivators didn't even have the ability to do this, how could they dare to take on such an important mission? It wasn't until after midnight that the opportunity finally came. A tall figure lifted the curtain and walked out of the tent. The ghost cultivators recognized this person. It was the body cultivator called Giant Armor, who had always been by Louis's side. It was rumored that this Giant Armor was extremely talented and had an extremely strong physique. He could fight against 10 people alone. They had only heard about it before, but now that they saw it with their own eyes, all the ghost cultivators were shocked. They could clearly feel the exuberant vitality in Giant Armor's body. This kind of physique shouldn't appear in an ordinary Ninth Order cultivator. Giant Armor didn't know what to do when he came out. He stood at the entrance of the tent and looked up at the sky, scratching his head. He was a little depressed at the moment. While he was meditating, Louis sent a message to him to come out and specifically told him to remain calm no matter what he saw. Giant Armor wanted to pretend that he couldn't see, but the silhouettes of the few figures not far in front of him were so conspicuous that he could only lower his head and not look in that direction. He just lifted the curtain and remained motionless. The ghost cultivators only hesitated for a moment before they were led into the tent by a man in the lead. The entire process was soundless, and not even a slight breeze was stirred up. After all the ghost cultivators passed under his armpits, Giant Armor put down the curtain and walked forward. This was also Louis's order because Louis said that it would be very dangerous for him later. Inside the big tent, a few ghost cultivators stood still and looked forward. They saw Louis of the Blue Blood sect at a glance. At this moment, Louis was sitting on a chair with his legs crossed and his arm resting on the armrest. He supported his cheek with one hand and stared expressionlessly at the leading ghost cultivator. When their eyes met, the ghost cultivator's heart skipped a beat. Had he been discovered? Impossible. He was confident in his concealment skills. He had once assassinated a Heaven-grade 9th Master with this skill. Louis hadn't even cultivated a Heaven-grade secret art, so how could he see him? Myriad Demon Ridge likes to break the rules so much? A faint questioning voice sounded. The ghost cultivators held their breaths and didn't respond. No one knew if the youth opposite them was deliberately mystifying them. After the battle at the Golden Light Summit, 4th Senior Brother told me that the Spirit Stream battlefield has its own rules. The Outer Circle's matters are settled by the Outer Circle's people, and the Inner Circle's matters are settled by the Inner Circle's people. I thought that after the previous incident, the Myriad Demon Ridge would learn a lesson, but now it seems that you don't remember the pain. The ghost cultivators couldn't hold back any longer. No matter how they looked at it, their whereabouts had been exposed. Especially when Louis kept glancing at them as if he was examining their cultivation bases as he spoke. The leading ghost cultivator took the lead, and the others followed closely behind him. Boiling killing intent surged in the tent. With a whoosh, fiery red spirit power exploded behind Louis. He spread his wings and soared into the sky. As he avoided the ghost cultivator's attacks, an array flag appeared in his hand and he waved it lightly. The scene in front of the ghost cultivators suddenly twisted and changed. Thick fog surged in from all directions and enveloped them, making it difficult for them to determine their direction. Bewildering formation! One of the ghost cultivators shouted. The ghost cultivators quickly moved to disperse the surrounding fog, but soon after, they felt their bodies turn cold. This was because spiritual energy was surging wildly from all directions, and an overwhelming amount of spells and imperial artifacts were attacking them from all directions. The tent was instantly shattered. No matter how strong the ghost cultivators' cultivation bases were, they couldn't surpass the spirit stream realm. How could they possibly survive such a concentrated attack? A few of them were annihilated on the spot. Only the leading ghost cultivator barely escaped death by relying on a defensive spirit artifact. But before he could catch his breath, the next wave of attacks arrived. The ghost cultivator revealed a look of despair and was instantly torn apart. Lu Ye's body slowly descended, and the guardian envoys gathered around him. After confirming that he wasn't injured, they relaxed. "What's their cultivation base?" Zhao Li asked. These ghost cultivators were able to sneak into Lu Ye's tent without anyone noticing, so they obviously weren't from the inner circle. They must have come from the core circle. 5 heavenly nines. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. In order to kill Lu Yi, the myriad demon ridge was really unscrupulous. Even in the core circle, heavenly nines were first-class elites, and they could all advance to the Cloud River tier at any time. But now, in order to kill Lu Yi, they had all been buried here. No one knew which sect these 5 people came from, but those sects were probably heartbroken right now. Is the myriad demon ridge really ignoring the rules? Someone frowned. It's not the first time they've ignored the rules. The last time, the myriad demon ridge had broken the rules, also to target Lu Yi, but at that time, the most important thing was to remove the Jade Blood sect. However, the situation was different from the current one. The Jade Blood sect's base was now in full swing, and there was no way to remove it. This time, they were targeting Lu Yi himself. A guardian envoy transmitted a few messages and suddenly said, "There's definite news." Just now, the 39th and 82nd place on the Spirit Stream list were removed. At the same time that the 5 heavenly nines were killed, the 39th and 82nd place on the Spirit Stream list were removed at the same time. This was obviously not a coincidence. Chapter 332. The Spirit Stream list was a list created by the heavens in the Spirit Stream battlefield. There were only 100 cultivators who could be listed on the Spirit Stream list. It could be said that as long as they did not die, they would definitely be able to advance to the Spirit Sea realm in the future. However, such a talent had died in an ambush without knowing the reason behind it. Although Li Baxian had told Lu Yi about the rules of the Spirit Stream battlefield, he had already been targeted once. How could he not be prepared? When the Allied forces under his command had reached a certain scale, he had been guarding against the myriad Devil Ridge's attacks. If they wanted to kill him while surrounded by thousands of cultivators, they could only use ghost cultivators. The ghost cultivators were not a big threat to Lu Yi. Not to mention his powerful soul and perception that far exceeded the Spirit Stream realm, he still had his Array Dao technique. He did not set up any defenses outside his tent because there was no need for them. He had already set up a formation inside the tent. If anyone dared to sneak in, Lu Yi only needed to activate the formation to trap the enemy. If he did not have such confidence, he would not have let giant armor let them in. With Lu Ye's current strength, he was not a match for one Heaven Level 9 cultivator, let alone 5. However, with the help of the formation and the arrangement in advance, the 5 powerful ghost cultivators were killed without even making a sound. Among them were 2 powerhouses on the Spirit Stream list. The myriad Devil Ridge was undoubtedly anxious because the Grand Heaven Alliance's allied forces led by Lu Yi were too big a threat to them. When they learned that the myriad Devil Ridge had sent 5 Heaven Level 9 ghost cultivators to attack, the thousands of cultivators in the allied forces were filled with righteous indignation. Lu Yi gave the order and the allied forces set sail to the next stop. In the blink of an eye, the fleet of dozens of ships left in a grandiose manner. At the same time, in the myriad Devil Ridge camp, messages were passed among the Spirit Sea realm cultivators. When they confirmed that the 5 ghost cultivators they had high hopes for had failed, even the Spirit Sea realm cultivators had heavy hearts. In the cultivation world of the 9 states, there had never been a Spirit Stream realm cultivator who could make the Spirit Sea realm cultivators so worried. They were so worried that they could not wait to catch him and cut him into pieces. The beheading operation against Lu Yi had already failed. Although they didn't know why the 5 ghost cultivators had failed, they had alerted Lu Ye this time. Now that Lu Ye was on guard, it was impossible for them to use similar methods again. Since he couldn't deal with Lu Ye, he could only face him head-on. This was the backup plan made by the Spirit Sea Realm warriors of the Demon's Ridge. They were not going to use this plan unless they had no other choice, because once this plan was carried out, it meant that the Demon's Ridge would have to give up many sects. However, if they didn't do that, they wouldn't be able to stop the Grand Heaven Alliance's coalition army. By then, the myriad Devil Ridge would suffer even greater losses. Orders were passed down one after another. In the direction where the Grand Heaven Alliance army was attacking, the forces of the myriad Devil Ridge gave up their sects' encampments. All the cultivators retreated in advance. Thousands of miles away, even more forces from the myriad Demon's Ridge had given up on their bases and were moving forward to meet up with each other. The commotion caused by the myriad Devil Ridge could not be hidden from the Grand Sky Alliance's investigation. Soon, the Alliance army understood the myriad Devil Ridge's plan. It had to be said that this was the best response that the myriad Demon Ridge could make. It was also the only way to stop the advance of the Alliance army. However, at this time, the news that the myriad Devil Ridge had sent 5 Heaven-level 9 ghost cultivators to assassinate Lu Ye had spread. Naturally, the Grand Sky Alliance was furious. It was like 2 children fighting. One side couldn't win at all and suddenly called a few adults over. How could the Grand Sky Alliance tolerate such blatant breaking of the rules? The last time the myriad Devil Ridge broke the rules, the Grand Sky Alliance quickly responded. It was the same this time. The flames of war started in the inner circle spread to the core circle. More and more powerful cultivators from the core circle joined the Alliance army. Seeing this, the myriad Devil Ridge naturally didn't want to be outdone. A large number of powerful cultivators from the core circle began to gather. The number of cultivators from both sides increased explosively. 10 days later, the 2 armies faced off at the Wei River. The Wei River was a large river that traversed the spiritual stream battlefield. It was 1,000 feet wide and the water was turbid and yellow. The river surged violently. It was also a natural barrier. Usually, cultivators could fly 1,000 feet easily with their weapons. However, at this moment, both sides of the river didn't dare to act rashly. It was because there were too many people on both sides. The Grand Sky Alliance had more than 18,000 people. They had all joined from various places recently. Many of them were Heaven Level 8 and Heaven Level 9 cultivators who came from the core circle. The myriad Devil Ridge had more than 20,000 people. A cultivator fight of this scale had never appeared on the spiritual stream battlefield before. It involved too many sections. The Grand Sky Alliance had gathered so many people. The number of sects involved was more than 100. The myriad Devil Ridge had fewer people. It was about 40 sects. Unlike the Grand Sky Alliance, the myriad Devil Ridge had come in full force. 40 sects had given up their bases in advance and gathered all their people here. It meant that the myriad Devil Ridge had gathered the power of 40 sects in advance. This was the backup plan that the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge had come up with. Since the myriad Devil Ridge couldn't defend their bases wherever the Grand Sky Alliance army went, they might as well give up in advance and gather all their forces in one place to fight against the enemy. It had to be said that this decisive move was very effective. At the very least, the Grand Sky Alliance army was blocked at the Wei River and couldn't move forward. The entire cultivation world of the 9 states was focused on this side. A large amount of information was being transmitted to the outside world at every moment. As time passed, more and more cultivators from both sides rushed over after hearing the news and strengthened each other's forces. Lu Ye didn't expect things to develop to this stage. His original intention was to bring some people to attack more bases of the myriad Devil Ridge forces and gain more merit. However, the situation was slowly getting out of his control. This wasn't a good thing. Once such a large-scale fight broke out, It would be a huge loss for both the Grand Sky Alliance and the myriad Devil Ridge. With tens of thousands of people fighting, who could guarantee that they would win? Moreover, with the Wei River as a barrier, the side that took the initiative to attack would be at a disadvantage. It could be said that no one dared to take the initiative to attack now. If they wanted to cross the river, they had to fly on their flying spiritual tools. Once their flying spiritual tools were destroyed, there would be heavy casualties. Under such a situation, the cultivators from both sides were in a deadlock with the Wei River in between. The people from the myriad Devil Ridge heaved a long sigh of relief. It wasn't easy. They had finally stopped the Grand Sky Alliance's coalition army. Looking at the entire Spirit Stream battlefield, the coalition army was like a gluttonous silkworm starting from the base of Mount Kanglan. Everywhere it passed, all the bases of the myriad Devil Ridge forces were eaten. There were already 100 or 200 bases of the myriad Devil Ridge that had been destroyed. The losses were incalculable. During the stalemate, the cultivators on both sides didn't stay idle. They provoked and cursed each other across the Wei River. Everyone's hearing was very good. Even though the Wei River was rolling, they could still hear the curses clearly. However, there was only thunder and no rain. Everyone was waiting for the other side to attack first. However, no one was a fool. No one would make such a stupid choice. The ground was covered in feathers. Amidst the curses, the people from the myriad Devil Ridge took special care of Lu Yi. After all, he was the cause of this incident. Before the sect exterminating leaf, everything on the Spirit Stream battlefield was stable and orderly. However, since the sect exterminating leaf, everything was in chaos. Now, the powerhouses from the core circle were running to the inner circle. Would they run to the outer circle in the future? From the perspective of the myriad Devil Ridge, the sect exterminating leaf was the biggest disaster in the world. The deadlock lasted for the third day. Dozens of people gathered in the tent where Lu Yi was. Glancing at everyone, Lu Yi said slowly, "I believe that everyone has received a message from the elders of your sections. The Divine Ocean Realm cultivators of the Grand Sky Alliance have agreed to the myriad Devil Ridge's request. They are ready to discuss with them how to resolve this matter." Half an hour ago, he received a message from Shui Yuan, who told him the news. If they weren't forced to, the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators from both sides wouldn't sit down and talk. After all, they had a blood feud for so many years. If they could fight, what was the point of talking? Everyone had bad tempers. Maybe the discussion would break down and a bloody battle would ensue. Moreover, the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators usually wouldn't care about the Spirit Stream battlefield. To them, the Spirit Stream battlefield was a place for the kids to train. It wasn't worth their attention. However, the situation on the Spirit Stream battlefield this time was too big. It was so big that the kids in the Spirit Stream realm couldn't handle it. The Divine Ocean Realm cultivators had to step in. Once the two armies that were separated by the Wei River started fighting, it would be a real war. At that time, no matter which side it was, they would suffer huge losses. Everyone nodded. Apparently, they had all received a message from their sections. "Brother Yi, what are your plans?" A Divine Ocean Realm 8 cultivator from the core region asked. Obviously, Lu Yi wanted to do something by calling them here at this time. Lu Ye's expression was calm. Looking at the current situation, the peace talks are the final outcome. It is also the trend of both sides. Perhaps the seniors of the Grand Sky Alliance can make the myriad demons ridge bleed a little. However, the attack of our allied forces will end here. Everyone was silent. Even though they were unwilling, they had to admit that Lu Yi was right. The myriad Devil Ridge couldn't bear the consequences of the war, and neither could the Grand Sky Alliance. In a battle of this scale, even the powerful cultivators from the core region couldn't gain much of an advantage. Therefore, the only result was that both sides would stop fighting and retreat. However, the myriad Devil Ridge was the one being attacked. Therefore, the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators of the Grand Sky Alliance would definitely make some demands that the Myriad Devil Ridge could accept. For example, they would compensate for some resources. This would be considered as an explanation to the Grand Sky Alliance. This process wouldn't be short. They would probably wrangle for a while. Therefore, I want to start another battlefield. Everyone raised their heads and looked at Lu Yi in shock. They didn't understand what he meant. After thinking for a while, some people finally understood. Zhao Li said, "Brother Yi, you mean, you want to start over at another place?" Chapter 333. Lu Ye's voice sounded in the tent. "With the size of the Alliance army, it doesn't make a difference whether I'm here or not." Lu Ye's role in the Alliance army had become very limited after the Alliance army's numbers had exceeded 3,000. Even if 3,000 people attacked, they could break through any of the Myriad Devil Ridge's defensive arrays. Lu Ye's role in the Alliance army was mainly in its cohesiveness. The Alliance army had been formed because of him, and the sects that had joined later were all like this. It could be said that Lu Ye's cultivation level wasn't the highest in the Alliance army, but he was the most convincing. Apart from him, even a powerhouse from the core circle would find it difficult to unite the Alliance army. The Alliance army was close to 20,000 people, so it didn't make much of a difference whether he was here or not. The peace talks between the Divine Sea Realm cultivators on both sides were inevitable, so the Alliance army was bound to disband. However, Lu Yi wasn't going to give up just like that. He didn't know how many merits he had obtained along the way, but he was still some distance away from his goal. Therefore, no matter what, he had to conquer more Myriad Devil Ridge forces. The Myriad Demon Ridge had given him the nickname of the sect-destroying leaf, but in reality, he was more like a raging inferno. No matter where he went, as long as he was still on the Spirit Stream battlefield, he would be able to spread this inferno in all directions. "What about us?" a guardian asked. "Wait, we'll put pressure on the Myriad Devil Ridge here. This will make it easier for the seniors of the Grand Sky Alliance to make more demands of the Myriad Devil Ridge. When the time comes, everyone will be able to obtain more benefit." Everyone fell into deep thought. After a short while, the Heaven Rank 8 cultivator nodded. "Brother Ye's plan is not bad. Do you need us to provide some help? We can send some people to follow you in case the Myriad Devil Ridge mobilizes people from the core circle to target you." "No need. Everyone's merits didn't come easy. I'll just take the giant armor." If Lu Yi wanted to open up another battlefield, he would have to use the Heaven's Fate Pillar to teleport to another place on the Spirit Stream battlefield. This kind of teleportation cost a lot of merit. It wouldn't matter if 1 or 2 people did it, but if too many people did it, it wouldn't be worth it. The Alliance army was formed with Lu Yi as the source and core. Now that he wanted to leave, no one had any objections. Although they wouldn't be able to reap benefits with Lu Yi in the future, how many benefits had they gained during this time? This was especially true for the few sects that had followed Lu Yi in his expeditions. They had gained the most benefit. Moreover, the two armies were currently facing each other, and there was no way for them to fight. Rather than wasting time like this, it was better to think of a way to create panic and pressure on the Myriad Demon Ridge. 30 minutes later, a big ship rose into the sky and flew toward the nearest Grand Heaven Alliance's base. At the same time, in Silver Light Island's encampment, tens of thousands of kilometers away, Luo Fu excitedly found Qi Shi. "Brother Yi is coming." Qi Shi was shocked. "Really?" "It's true. I just received the news." The Grand Heaven Alliance army led by Lu Yi had stirred up quite a commotion recently. The entire Spirit Stream battlefield was paying attention to it. How could Luo Fu and Qi Shi not know? Back then, when Lu Yi had just arrived in the inner circle, he had needed to borrow the power of Yingjiao to attack the Sky Pillar sect's encampment. At that time, he still didn't have the ability to break other people's defensive array, so after breaking through the Sky Pillar sect's encampment, Lu Yi left. In less than half a year, Lu Yi had single-handedly raised an army of nearly 20,000 cultivators. They had swept through the inner circle, causing the myriad demon ridge to suffer unspeakably. Luo Fu and Qi Shi were envious. If Lu Yi had this kind of ability when he first came to Silver Light Island, then the Sky Expanse sect and Azure Billow Mountain wouldn't have been able to benefit from him. In the inner circle, they were clearly the first to contact Lu Yi and were also the first to form an alliance with the Jade Blood sect. If it weren't for the fact that Silver Light Island's encampment was too far away from the Grand Heaven Alliance, Luo Fu would have brought people to help. Every time he thought of this, Luo Fu felt more and more aggrieved. He then led a group of people to cause trouble for the Cloud Smoke sect. Ever since the Sky Pillar sect's encampment was destroyed and more than half of its cultivators were killed, the Sky Pillar sect had become a coward. Under the suppression of Silver Light Island, the Sky Pillar sect still couldn't rebuild their encampment in peace. The Cloud Smoke sect, which had originally been able to rely on the Sky Pillar sect, naturally became the focus of Silver Light Island's suppression. However, the two sects' strength was almost the same, so it wasn't easy for Silver Light Island to suppress them. Therefore, every time Luo Fu went to find trouble with the Cloud Smoke sect, he would call upon the nearby Fahua sect cultivators. Recently, Luo Fu had been eagerly waiting for Lu Yi to lead the Grand Heaven Alliance to his encampment. Then, he would be able to join them. But when he learned that the Myriad Demon Ridge had also gathered 20,000 cultivators to confront the Grand Heaven Alliance's army by the Wei River, Luo Fu knew that he wouldn't be able to wait for Lu Ye's arrival. His heart was filled with melancholy. He hadn't thought that Lu Yi would take the initiative to send a message to him, informing him that he was about to arrive at Silver Light Island's encampment. At this time, Lu Yi had abandoned the Grand Heaven Alliance and instead ran to Silver Light Island, which was tens of thousands of kilometers away. His intentions were self-evident. Luo Fu and Qi Shi weren't fools, so they could naturally guess Lu Ye's plan. Junior Marshal Brother, it's time for Silver Light Island to rise. Luo Fu's face was filled with excitement. Qi Shi was more or less calm, but he still thought about it a few times before saying, "Contact the Fahua sect." Luo Fu slapped his head. Yes, contact the Fahua sect. Just as he sent a message to the guardian of the Fahua sect, a cultivator from the sect came to report, "Senior Marshal Brothers, Senior Marshal Brother Lu is here." Which Senior Marshal Brother Lu? Luo Fu frowned. It's Lu Ye from the Jade Blood sect, Senior Marshal Brother Lu. Luo Fu and Qi Shi looked at each other. They were both surprised that Lu Yi had come so quickly. The news had just been sent over, and the person had already arrived. They hurriedly rushed over to Tianji Hall. When they arrived, they saw that it was indeed Lu Yi, accompanied by a huge body cultivator. When old friends met, they obviously exchanged warm greetings. In particular, the people of Silver Light Island had already sensed Lu Ye's intentions. However, under Lu Ye's orders, the news of his arrival at Silver Light Island was sealed off very soon. The only cultivators who knew about this were ordered to keep their mouths shut, and they were secretly led into a secret room by Luo Fu. 4 hours later, the guardian of the Fahua sect arrived in a hurry. He had traveled as fast as lightning, desperately flying on his artifact. He did not dare to waste any time. By the time he arrived at Silver Light Island, his face was slightly pale. However, after seeing Lu Yi, the guardian's face immediately glowed with excitement. Just like Luo Fu had thought, he also realized that it was time for the Fahua sect to rise. At this moment, the headmaster of the Jade Blood sect, Tang Yifeng, turned into a streak of light and rushed into the sky, flying off in a certain direction. The flight speed of Divine Sea Realm cultivators could not be matched by Spirit Stream Realm cultivators. Previously, Lu Yi had been poisoned by the spies of the Myriad Demons Ridge in the Heaven Expanse sect, so the sect master had only spent a single night with Shui Yuan to cross 2 plains and arrive in the Mist Province from the War Province. Before long, a streak of light approached them from the side. A voice rang out from there, "Elder Tang?" The headmaster turned around and saw who it was. He stopped and waited. The streak of light arrived before him very soon, revealing the figure. It was Pang Zhen of the Vitality sect. The headmaster grumbled, "I'm already so old. Why do I have to come all the way here? Can't you just represent the War Province?" Pang Zhen chuckled. "It was caused by the disciples of the Jade Blood sect. If Elder Tang doesn't show up, what's the point of discussing? Is it a request from the Myriad Demon's Ridge?" "That's right. Then I'll have to talk to them properly later. They're all outrageous. They don't know how to respect the old at all." "Go ahead, Elder Tang. The War Province is behind you. The Grand Heaven Alliance is also behind you." The headmaster's eyes flickered. He understood. "Let's talk as we go. Elder Tang, please." Pang Zhen extended his hand. The two of them immediately turned into streaks of light and flew away side by side. Along the way, Pang Zhen sighed emotionally. "Young people nowadays are amazing. They're much more driven than I was back then. The Jade Blood sect has a bright future ahead, Elder Tang." The headmaster's smile was brighter than a flower. "However," he said, "that kid is too mischievous. He doesn't know the severity of his actions. I'll teach him a lesson later." It's good for young people to have drive. There's no need to be harsh on him. This time, he's won glory for the Grand Heaven Alliance. There aren't many such talents among the younger generation in the Alliance. A few days ago, Elder Su from the Green Jade sect sent me a message. Unfortunately, the Green Jade sect missed such a good seedling. That old geezer just can't bear to see others doing well. Moreover, what does the Jade Blood sect's disciple have to do with the Green Jade sect? Elder Tang, you might not know this, but when we were at Evil Moon Valley, the Green Jade sect was in charge of evaluating Lu Yi. They wanted to recruit him, but after they found out that he only has a one-leaf innate talent, they gave up on the idea. Is that so? Clearly, the headmaster had just learned about this. He could not help but laugh out loud. Serves the Green Jade sect's disciple right for looking down on us. That's right. Who would have thought that a one-leaf cultivator could achieve so much? Speaking of which, why didn't you test his innate talent again, Elder Tang? Logically speaking, it's impossible for a one-leaf cultivator to cultivate so quickly. The testing conditions at Evil Moon Valley back then were simple and crude. Perhaps there was some oversight. The headmaster waved his hand. It doesn't matter if he has a one-leaf or two-leaf cultivation base. My innate talent isn't that great either. When I was tested back then, I only had 34 leaves. So what? A cultivator's cultivation doesn't rely on innate talent alone. There were many people at our age who were more talented than us back then, but where did they go? Didn't they turn into dust in the end? You have a point, Elder Tang. However, this little fellow still cares a lot about his one-leaf title. I remember this title was given to him by that brat from the Vitality sect called Lu Shan. When you return, tell him to hurry up and advance. Otherwise, when Lu Yi enters the Cloud River battlefield, Lu Shan will suffer. Ha ha, I know about this as well. If that day really comes, it'll be Lu Shan's fault. Chapter 334. The 9 provinces consisted of the Heaven Plain, Ding Plain, Green Plain, Thunder Plain, War Plain, Cloud Plain, Mist Plain, Serene Plain, and Song Plain. The Green Plain and Mist Plain were under the complete control of the Grand Heaven Alliance, while the Cloud Plain and Thunder Plain belonged to the Myriad Demon Ridge. As for the remaining 5 provinces, the sects of the 2 great factions stood side by side. There was no clear right of ownership. Occasionally, the East would prevail over the West, and at other times the West would prevail over the East. They were territories that the 2 sides fought over. The Myriad Demon Ridge had mentioned the peace talks, so the location was obviously chosen by the Grand Heaven Alliance. There was a continuous mountain range where the Green Plain and Cloud Plain intersected. The mountain range was like a huge dragon that stretched across the ground. It rose and fell, separating the 2 plains. Crouching Dragon Mountain was where the Grand Heaven Alliance had chosen to hold the talks. When the sect master and Pang Zhen arrived at the agreed-upon location, there were already over a dozen people waiting there. They were all Divine Sea Realm cultivators, and they were all among the peak of the Divine Sea Realm. Unlike what an ordinary person imagined, not only did these 10-plus top experts from both sides not come into conflict with each other, they were even chatting happily with each other. If someone who did not know better saw this, they would probably think they were all from the same faction. Did they have no grievances with each other? Obviously not. Every single one of them had slaughtered their way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. They had already lost count of the lives they had taken. This was because everyone knew that the purpose of this meeting was to discuss how to resolve the conflict on the Spirit Stream battlefield. It was impossible for them to fight. Since they could not fight, why did they have to be so cold? Only when the two people from the warplane arrived did everyone stop chatting and laughing. "We're late." Pang Zhen clasped his fist. Actually, he and the sect master had not been slow. It was the people from the other planes who had arrived too quickly. This was more than enough to demonstrate how eager the Myriad Demon Ridge was to negotiate. The leader of the Myriad Demon Ridge was an old man with a waxy complexion. He said, "Since everyone's here, let's begin." No one had any objections. Pang Zhen immediately flicked a jade slip towards the old man. There was nothing else in the jade slip, only the various requests from the Grand Heaven Alliance. This was what he had discussed with the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the various provinces on the way here. There was no problem with the Myriad Demon Ridge wanting to negotiate. The situation was in a stalemate right now. The Grand Heaven Alliance did not want the little fellows in the Spirit Stream battlefield to get into a fight. However, the Myriad Demon Ridge was the one being attacked, so they definitely had to pay a price. The old man reached out and caught the jade slip before scanning it with his divine sense. Then, he expressionlessly passed it to the person next to him. Grand Heaven Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the Myriad Demon Ridge all had different expressions of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators. The Grand Heaven Alliance, the Grand Heaven Alliance's alliance was, and the Grand Heaven Alliance. They had already expected that Grand Heaven Alliance's price would not be too low, but they had underestimated Grand Heaven Alliance's determination to rip them off. The conditions in the jade slip had already exceeded their psychological limit. They could not agree to it at all. It should be known that the Grand Heaven Alliance was not only asking for compensation in terms of resources, but they were also taking the opportunity to ask for half of the province. That, by heaven, the price was too high, so high that it was not sincere at all. Pang Zhen chuckled. "If you are not satisfied, we can talk slowly." "We can talk slowly, but the little fellows in the Spirit Stream battlefield can't be slow. They are all young and vigorous. If they fight impulsively, many of them will die," the Grand Heaven Elder said. He used his divine sea and gave the jade slip back. "This is the sincerity of the Myriad Demon Ridge. If the Grand Heaven Alliance thinks it is enough, we can stop here." Pang Zhen took back the jade slip. He checked it and shook his head. "I don't see any sincerity." He gave the jade slip to the chief. The chief waved his hand and said, "I am old. I don't want to read it. You can discuss." Lu Yi was the one who caused this. No matter how much the Myriad Demon Ridge would pay, the Grand Heaven Alliance would not lose out to the Jade Blood sect. The chief didn't want to worry about it. The jade slip passed through the hands of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the Grand Heaven Alliance. When it was returned to Pang Zhen, there was more content in the jade slip. Pang Zhen checked it and added some more. Just like that, the small jade slip passed through the hands of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators. The content was added and subtracted, but they couldn't reach a consensus. The Divine Sea Realm cultivator of the Myriad Demon Ridge said that they couldn't be slow, but he didn't seem to be in a hurry when he was negotiating with the Grand Heaven Alliance. He checked every line carefully and deleted them. After half a day, when the jade slip was returned to him, He helplessly found that the content of the jade slip was not much different from when Pang Zhen gave it to him the first time. He couldn't help but look up at Pang Zhen. Pang Zhen was smiling. Pang Zhen, the Grand Heaven Alliance should show some sincerity. Then it depends on you. One side asked for too much, and the other side asked for too much. It would be strange if they could reach a consensus. The sect master looked down and closed his eyes to rest. He faintly felt that this matter would take at least half a month to reach a conclusion. As for the spirit stream battlefield, there was no need to worry. With the Wei River as a barrier, neither side dared to make the first move. Moreover, those little fellows were waiting for the results of the negotiations. While the Divine Sea Realm cultivators were haggling over every detail, the cultivators of the Silver Light Island and the Fahua sect had arrived at the Cloud Smoke sect's encampment and started to attack the formation. The cultivators of the Cloud Smoke sect were helpless. Ever since the Sky Pillar sect was crippled, they had been bullied like this. Every now and then, the Silver Light Island and the Fahua sect would do the same. It could be said that the Cloud Smoke sect was used to it. Other than the people who were taking care of the formation, the other cultivators of the Cloud Smoke sect were still doing what they were supposed to do. After all, it was impossible for the Silver Light Island and the Fahua sect to break the formation. At most, the Cloud Smoke sect would lose some spirit stones. Then, the Cloud Smoke sect's guardian who was in charge of controlling the formation saw a familiar young man walk out of the crowd with more than 30 people beside him. He didn't react until the group of people led by the young man took out the formation flag. Sect Exterminating Leaf. The guardian's face turned pale and his voice trembled. His mind went blank and he almost thought that he was seeing things. It was rumored that the Sect Exterminating Leaf and the Grand Sky Alliance's army were facing off against the 20,000 cultivators of the Myriad Devil Mountain at the Wei River. Logically speaking, it was impossible for this person to appear here. However, if he didn't care about the merit points and used the Heavenly Fate Pillar to teleport, he could go anywhere in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Did that Sect Exterminating Leaf lack merit points? Of course not. Who knew how many cultivators of the Myriad Devil Mountain had died at his hands? Otherwise, he wouldn't have been called the Sect Exterminating Leaf. Retreat to the 9 provinces. The Cloud Smoke sect's guardian only needed a moment to figure out what had happened. He immediately ordered his sect's cultivators to retreat to the 9 provinces. However, the Cloud Smoke sect's cultivators didn't gather together. They were used to the attacks of the Silver Light Island and the Fahua sect, so they didn't take this attack seriously. As a result, the Cloud Smoke sect's cultivators were scattered all over the place. By the time everyone received the order, they had already missed the best time to retreat. The formation was broken, and the cultivators of the Silver Light Island and the Fahua sect swarmed in. Lu Yi and Giant Armor led the way. In an instant, the Cloud Smoke sect's base was covered in blood. After taking over the Yunyan Order's base, Lu Yi immediately entered the Tianji Hall to steal the blessing from the Tianji Pillar. After taking his share, he didn't wait for Luo Fu and the others to finish cleaning up the battlefield. He flew up with giant armor and disappeared in a flash of light. Luo Fu's shout rang out, "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up!" Lu Yi didn't wait for Luo Fu because he was running out of time. The Divine Ocean Realm cultivators of the 2 factions had already started to negotiate, and it wouldn't be long before the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators gave orders. Lu Yi had to conquer more forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge before the Divine Ocean Realm cultivators made a decision. On one hand, he wanted to earn merits, and on the other hand, he could increase his bargaining chip in the negotiation. While the Silver Light Island and the Fahua sect were attacking the Cloud Smoke sect's base, the 2 nearby forces of the Haotian Alliance had gathered enough people and were rushing toward the base of another force of the Myriad Devil Ridge. When Lu Yi arrived, he could cooperate with them to break the sect's defensive formation. On the Spirit Peak of the Crouching Dragon Mountain, the Spirit Sea Realm cultivators were still discussing, but the atmosphere was no longer as peaceful as before. Although they didn't quarrel for the sake of their reputation, sarcastic words kept coming out of their mouth. Until one moment, the elder of the myriad Devil Ridge suddenly received a message. He checked it with his mind and calmly handed the jade slip to Pangjin. This is the bottom line of the myriad Devil Ridge. If the Hautian Alliance thinks it's okay, then sign the heavenly secret contract. Pangjin took the jade slip and checked it. He was slightly surprised because the myriad Devil Ridge had shown a lot of sincerity this time. The conditions in the jade slip hadn't been reduced by much. This result was better than he had expected. Negotiation was like doing business. One side raised the price and the other side paid the price. Then, they would slowly come up with a result that was acceptable to both sides. The previous negotiation obviously didn't go well, but the myriad Devil Ridge suddenly took a big step back. There must be something wrong if something was out of the ordinary. Pangjin was an experienced man, and he vaguely sensed that something was wrong. There must be a reason for the myriad Devil Ridge to make such a decision, but he didn't know what the reason was. Lu Ye's eyes flashed. He handed the jade slip to the sect leader. Elder Tang, take a look. The sect leader, who had been resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. He had already stated that he wouldn't participate in this negotiation, but Pangjin asked him to take a look at the contents of the jade slip. Obviously, something unexpected had happened. The sect leader took the jade slip and checked it. He was also surprised because the myriad Devil Ridge really took a big step back this time. The sect leader raised his head and looked at the elder of the myriad Devil Ridge. Pangjin also looked at him. The elder's eyes twitched. He knew that he couldn't hide it, so he simply said bluntly, "The Cloud Smoke Sect's base has been occupied. Now, the Miluo Sect's base is..." Well, just now, the Miluo Sect's base was also occupied. He turned to look at the sect leader. The Jade Blood Sect has an amazing little guy. Chapter 335. The Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the Grand Sky Alliance immediately took out the map of the Spirit Stream battlefield. They found that the Cloud Smoke Sect and the Miluo Sect were hundreds of thousands of miles away from the Wei River. They knew that the little guy from the Jade Blood Sect must have spent a lot of merit points to use the Heaven's Fate Pillar to teleport. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to cross such a long distance so quickly. For other Spirit Stream Realm cultivators, this method of teleportation wasn't worth it. After all, merit points weren't easy to come by. Every teleportation cost thousands of merit points. But it was different for Lu Yi. He did spend a lot of merit points, but as long as he captured someone else's base, he could earn them back. First, there was the Cloud Smoke Sect, now there was the Miluo Sect. Who would be next? Even an idiot would know that Lu Yi was going to spread the flames of war everywhere. Just like how he managed to create the Grand Heaven Alliance army, he could create the second one now. This was the reason why the myriad Devil Ridge took a big step back. The old man knew that if he didn't stop Lu Ye's actions quickly, he could really turn the entire inner circle into a pot of porridge. This kid is too reckless. I'll reprimand him now. With that, the head elder started to send a message to Lu Yi. At this moment, Lu Yi, who was flying with the giant armor, checked his own battlefield imprint and saw the head elder's message. The message was simple, only 4 words. "Leave everything to me." Lu Yi was relieved. On the Spirit Mountain, the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the Grand Sky Alliance started to get busy. They sent out messages to inquire about the Spirit Stream battlefield. The information they received was the same as the information provided by the myriad Devil Ridge. They also received news that Lu Yi left not long after capturing the Miluo Sect's base. He was already heading to the 3rd base of the myriad Devil Ridge. The old man leading the myriad Devil Ridge wanted to continue negotiating with Pangjin several times, but Pangjin raised his hand and stopped him. Pangjin's face was serious. He looked very busy, but he was actually very happy. The old man sighed. "Pangjin, there's no point in stalling. If we can stop that kid once, we can stop him a second time. We'll just have to give up a few bases. Pang Zhen nodded. We've seen the myriad Devil Ridge's courage. The elder felt tired. Tell me the conditions of Haotian alliance. Pang Zhen was no longer in a hurry. He stared at the old man and said indifferently, in addition to the conditions just now, I'll add half a province's base. As for which half a province it will be, your myriad Demon Ridge can discuss it among yourselves. This matter is not urgent and can be done slowly. To be honest, the conditions that the myriad Demon Ridge had agreed to previously had already exceeded his expectations. If there was no new news, it would definitely be the best outcome for this peace negotiation. However, the situation was different now. Lu Yi had opened up a second battlefield by himself. The confrontation at Wei River was no longer important. If Pang Zhen couldn't see the value of this action, then he didn't deserve to be the vice leader of Haotian Alliance. Just as he had said, the Grand Sky Alliance wasn't in a hurry. The myriad Devil Ridge should be in a hurry. The longer the delay, the greater the losses on the myriad Devil Ridge's side would be. Every time a garrison was captured, a large amount of merit points and resources would be lost. As for the old man saying that he could stop Lu Yi a second time, he would do so. If Lu Yi could open up a second battlefield, then he could open up a third, a fourth. As long as he didn't die, the myriad Devil Ridge wouldn't be safe. Pang Zhen needed to consider how to use his side's advantage to maximize the benefits of the negotiation. The more Lu Yi caused trouble on the Spirit Stream battlefield, the more pressure the myriad Devil Ridge would have to bear. Pang Zhen, don't push your luck. The old man's tone was no longer as warm as before. No one would be able to remain calm when faced with such a situation. The Grand Sky Alliance had made it clear that they wanted to control the myriad Devil Ridge. The myriad Devil Ridge couldn't and didn't dare to back down too much. So you can discuss it slowly and come up with a plan that you can accept. Pang Zhen chuckled. The old man took a deep look at him and didn't say anything else. He sent out a message while communicating with the Divine Sea Realm cultivators around him. Not long after, another piece of news came from the Spirit Stream battlefield. After the Cloud Smoke sect and the Miluo sect, the third garrison of the myriad Devil Ridge had been captured. Now Lu Yi had gathered the power of 6 sects and gathered more than 1,000 cultivators. Their morale was high as they set off for the next garrison of the myriad Devil Ridge. In this area, the forces of Grand Sky Alliance who heard the news were all eager to take action. They all led their men to join the alliance. On the other hand, the myriad Devil Ridge was also making emergency arrangements. Just like before, the myriad Devil Ridge factions took the initiative to abandon their bases in the direction of the Alliance army. Everyone gathered in one location. 2 days later, the two armies each had 3,000 to 4,000 cultivators. They were separated by 3 miles and were facing each other. However, the situation was different from the first one. There were no natural barriers between the two armies, so the situation was much more serious. This was because a careless mistake could really trigger a large-scale war. Only then did the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators let out a sigh of relief. The myriad Devil Ridge didn't lose too much this time. The main reason was that they had experience in dealing with such a situation and had made timely arrangements. Therefore, the second army that Lu Yi pulled out only captured a dozen or so garrison of the myriad Devil Ridge forces along the way. Even so, looking at the battlefield, the dragon that represented the myriad Devil Ridge had another broken dragon bone. On the spirit peak of the Crouching Dragon Mountain, the myriad Devil Ridge elder looked at Pang Zhen with a gloomy expression. Can we talk now? For the past 2 days, both sides had been waiting and didn't communicate at all. Only now did the myriad Devil Ridge stop the second army's attack. Pang Zhen was surprised. The myriad Devil Ridge has made a decision? Let's hear it. The elder said, the conditions remain the same. Then what should we talk about? If you guys continue to delay like this, I'm afraid that kid will run out and open up a third battlefield. The eyelids of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge couldn't help but twitch. This was also what they were most worried about. Now, a strange situation had appeared on the Spirit Stream battlefield. All the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge's major sects had been recalled to defend their garrisons. Every sect was jittery. Any Grand Sky Alliance cultivator who came to attack would be scared out of their wit. They were afraid that a sect destroying ye would suddenly jump out from the other side. No matter what, we can't give up half of the province. I'm hungry. Pang Zhen rubbed his stomach and looked at the others on his side. Who brought food? The elder turned to look at the sect master. Brother Tang, Lu Ye is a disciple of the Jade Blood sect. Before he could finish, the sect master waved his hand and said, Our Jade Blood sect is just a rank 9 sect. This is a serious matter and we can't comment on it. We will listen to the Grand Sky Alliance. Just a rank 9, these words were harsh to the ears. But it was the truth. A monster appeared out of a rank 9 sect, and now the myriad Devil Ridge was in a terrible situation. But the myriad Devil Ridge couldn't do anything to him. True Lake Realm cultivators were sent out, but 2 of them died. They also sent a Heaven rank 9 ghost cultivator to kill him, but they were all wiped out. If that kid was in the 9 continents, these Divine Sea Realm cultivators could easily kill him. But he was in the Spirit Stream battlefield. These Divine Sea Realm cultivators had never hated Tianji's mediation and suppression so much. They are fighting, a Divine Sea Realm cultivator suddenly said with a trembling voice. What? Everyone present, whether it was the Grand Sky Alliance or the myriad Devil Ridge, turned pale with fright. Pang Zhen wasn't hungry anymore and hurriedly asked for information on the Spirit Stream battlefield through their own channels. They hadn't come up with a definite result yet. How did they start fighting? Which side was fighting? If it was the second Allied army led by Lu Yi, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, there weren't many people there. But if it was the Wei River that started fighting, things couldn't be settled. After a while, everyone received the exact news. They really started fighting. Fortunately, the Wei River was safe. After all, there was a natural barrier between them. Tens of thousands of people didn't dare to act rashly. It was the second Allied army led by Lu Yi that started fighting. 6,000 to 7,000 inner circle cultivators fought. Then, the myriad Devil Ridge suffered a great loss. The reason for this result was that a strong reinforcement came from the Jade Blood sect. The Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the Grand Sky Alliance looked at each other. At their level of cultivation, it was unprecedented for them to be affected by a group of Spirit Stream Realm cultivators. They couldn't help but sigh. The little guys nowadays were really good at causing trouble. If they were all like the little guy from the Jade Blood sect, they would probably lose hundreds of years of their lives. Life was too exciting. On the other hand, the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge all looked gloomy. They looked at the sect master with unkind eyes. The sect master glared at them. Why are you looking at me? I didn't give the order. It's not proper for me to reprimand him. At this moment, in the Spirit Stream battlefield, thousands of cultivators of the Grand Sky Alliance were chasing after the fleeing myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Among them, a giant eagle was particularly eye-catching. The giant eagle was Little Gray from the Jade Blood sect. Originally, the myriad Devil Ridge had used the same trick and gathered thousands of cultivators to block the front. Lu Yi had planned to leave this place and start a third battlefield elsewhere. However, before he could do anything, a message came from the battlefield marked. Hua Xiai had come. As early as when Lu Yi pulled the first coalition army to fight, Hua Xiai wanted to help. No matter what, she was a disciple of the Jade Blood sect and a medical cultivator. Lu Yi was often injured in the war and she could help treat him. However, the journey was too far. Who would have thought that Lu Yi would leave the Wei River and run to Silverlight Island? They weren't very far from the Jade Blood sect. Hua Xiai immediately set off with Little Gray. When she sent a message to Lu Yi, they were almost there. Knowing that Hua Xiai had brought Little Gray, Lu Yi seized the opportunity to order the coalition army to attack. Although this second army of 3,000 people had only been formed for a few days, they had been invincible under Lu Ye's leadership. Therefore, even if they were facing enemies with similar numbers, the 3,000 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators still rushed out without hesitation when Lu Yi gave the order. Chapter 336. The myriad Devil Ridges cultivators were dumbfounded. No one expected the Grand Heaven Alliance to attack just like that. They thought the situation here would be the same as the Wei River, where both sides would be in a stalemate. After all, both sides had so many people. Once they fought, both sides would suffer losses. No one could guarantee that they would win. However, the Grand Heaven Alliance really attacked. They hurriedly arranged the formation. In the sky, a huge figure quickly swept over the charging Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. It flapped its wings in midair, and a sky full of wind blades attacked. A gap was immediately torn in the myriad Devil Ridges front line. For example, Little Gray and Ying Jiao were all Overlord-level demonic beasts in the Spirit Stream battlefield. What was an Overlord level? It meant that their strength had reached the limit of the Spirit Stream battlefield. They could be the king of the entire battlefield. Even the cultivators on the Spirit Stream list couldn't compare to them. Back then, Ying Jiao was attracted by the blood chi in the scale armor. It almost broke through the Sky Pillar Sect's encampment with its own strength. The Sky Pillar Sect's cultivators tried their best to resist, but it still killed hundreds of them. As a demonic beast on the same level as Ying Jiao, how could Little Gray be weak? Moreover, compared to Ying Jiao, Little Gray, who was born with the ability to fly, was more of a threat to cultivators because it was agile enough. It swooped down a few times, and the sky was full of wind blades. One by one, the cultivators were chopped into pieces, and blood was everywhere. Several huge gaps were torn in the myriad Devil Ridges' tight defense line. Just as the myriad Devil Ridges cultivators were panicking, the Grand Heaven Alliance's coalition, led by Lu Yi and Giant Armor, arrived. Like a hot knife through butter, the Grand Heaven Alliance's coalition easily split the myriad Devil Ridges' front line. Although the myriad Devil Ridge resisted, the front line was already in chaos. How could they resist? Often, as soon as they took out their spirit weapons, several attacks greeted them. They fell into a pool of blood without making a sound. The battle only lasted for a short time before the myriad Devil Ridges' front line completely collapsed. What happened next was simple. The Grand Heaven Alliance's coalition army split into two groups. One group was led by Lu Yi and had more than 1,000 people. The other group was led by Luo Fu and had more than 2,000 people. They chased after the myriad Devil Ridges cultivators who fled. In this battle, the myriad Devil Ridges cultivators lost more than 1,000 people, while the Grand Heaven Alliance lost less than 200 to 300 people. When the news spread, the whole world was shocked. The Divine Sea Realm cultivators on both sides also repeatedly ordered the Wei River Guardian envoys not to act rashly. Half of the reason why Lu Yi was able to win was because of Little Gray. This kind of overlord-level demonic beast was simply too terrifying. The situation at the Wei River was different. If they really fought, no one would have an advantage. A day later, the Alliance army that had split into two groups gathered again. Along the way, they swept through a few abandoned bases of the Myriad Demons Ridge and continued to move forward. On the ship, Lu Yi sat cross-legged with his upper body bare. The new and old scars on his body were a ghastly sight. Hua Xiai sat beside him, gentle spiritual energy gushing out from her palm to heal the new wounds on Lu Ye's body. He sighed slightly in his heart. When he first met Lu Yi, the scars on his body were also so hideous. After so long, it was still the same. "Why are you working so hard?" Hua Xiai said slowly. "If this goes on, I might really have to burn paper offerings for you one day." He glanced at Yi. "Why didn't you stop him?" Yi stuck out her tongue. How could she stop Lu Yi when he was rushing to kill the enemy? The only thing she could do was to stay close to Lu Yi and block some of the hidden arrows for him. How's the station? Lu Yi asked. Very good. When they heard that you were in the inner circle, they all clamored to come and help. Chen Yu wanted to come this time too, but I stopped him. Chen Yu has reached the 8th order, right? He reached the 8th order 2 months ago, but there were many trivial matters at the station, so he didn't leave for the time being. If you come, won't there be no one to take charge of the situation at the station? Before I left, I already transferred the position of vice guardian to Gu Yang. This matter has also been approved by second senior sister. Gu Yang. That's good. Compared to others, his temperament is relatively calm. Second senior sister can't be wrong about people. While they were chatting, the battlefield mark suddenly moved. Lu Yi hurriedly checked and found that it was a message from the sect master. We can't hold on any longer. Do you have any requests? You can tell me. This old master will try to persuade you. Seeing this message, Lu Yi knew that Myriad Demon Ridge was anxious. After pondering for a moment, he sent a message. At the same time, on the spirit peak of Crouching Dragon Mountain, the atmosphere between the spirit sea realm cultivators on both sides had begun to turn solemn. The old man from Myriad Demon Ridge said in a deep voice, Pangzhen, you don't want to fight to the death, do you? Indeed, our Myriad Demon Ridge can't stop Lu Yi's methods right now and can only passively resist, but if we let him continue like this, there might be an all-out war on the Spirit Stream battlefield. As soon as this was said, the expressions of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of Grand Heaven Alliance turned serious. Once an all-out war on the Spirit Stream battlefield happened, it meant that all the sects in the 9 states would be swept in. Don't underestimate the courage and determination of Myriad Demon Ridge. Right now, Myriad Demon Ridge had suffered a great loss and was about to be pushed to the limit. If Lu Yi still had any follow-up actions, it might really trigger an all-out war on the Spirit Stream battlefield. Anyway, I'm already having a hard time, so I won't let anyone else have a good time. It was foreseeable that when the time came, blood would flow like a river on the Spirit Stream battlefield. No sect would be able to live in peace. Half a state, don't mention this again. You know that Myriad Demon Ridge won't agree to this condition. Other than this, other conditions can be discussed. Obviously, he was implying that they could compensate with more resources. The old man looked at the sect leader again. If little friend Yi has any conditions, he can raise them alone. Myriad Demon Ridge will give priority. The source of the matter was Lu Yi. Although Myriad Demon Ridge was negotiating with Grand Heaven Alliance represented by Pangzhen, they still had to consider the feelings of the Jade Blood sect and Lu Yi. Yi does have his own conditions, the sect leader said. Everyone looked over. The sect leader lowered his eyes slightly. 3 months ago, Yi went to the Sky Expanse sect's encampment and was secretly poisoned. He almost died on the spot. It would have been better if he didn't mention this. Once he did, the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge became angry. At that time, the people of the Jade Blood sect had gone overboard. They all thought that Lu Yi had been poisoned to death and were overjoyed. But what happened in the end? 2 months later, that guy appeared in the Spirit Stream battlefield alive and well. While his cultivation in the Tao of Formations had greatly improved, he also pulled together a Grand Heaven Alliance army and stirred up a storm. Hundreds of Myriad Demon Ridge forces suffered greatly. When they heard that Lu Yi had come back from the dead, Myriad Demon Ridge was dumbfounded. They really didn't understand how he survived because that poison not only targeted the physical body, but also the soul. Once a Spirit Stream realm cultivator was poisoned, there was no chance of survival. Just as the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge looked uncertain, the sect leader changed the topic. Fortunately, he was lucky. Although he was on the verge of death several times, he was still saved. Myriad Demon Ridge still hadn't come to a conclusion as to why Lu Yi was able to escape death, because only a few people knew the whole story. However, it was useless to think about this now. But he has always remembered the person who poisoned him. If they hadn't invited Shui Yuan in time that day, and if Lu Yi didn't happen to have a treasure like the soul-cleansing water, giant armor and Zhao Li would have died. Lu Yi didn't know which Myriad Demon Ridge force did it, but how could Myriad Demon Ridge not know? This grudge had to be avenged. So, Yi wants to know which force did it. The old man of Myriad Demon Ridge waited for him to continue, but he didn't. He frowned and said, "That's it?" The sect leader said, "What else can we do?" The old man pondered for a moment and said the name of a sect. "Swear on the heavenly secret oath." The old man's face darkened. "Brother Tang, you and I have known each other for so many years," the sect leader said bluntly. "It's because we have known each other for so many years that I know your character. How would I know if a random 6th-rank sect is true? If it's true, what's wrong with swearing on the heavenly secret oath?" The old man didn't speak. "Oh ho, another Myriad Devil Ridge encampment has been captured." The sect master suddenly took pleasure in their misfortune. "Golden Cloud Tower." The old man said the name of another sect. "As far as I know, Golden Cloud Tower is the main instigator." The sect leader immediately cursed. "If I knew it was this group of bastards who were secretly causing trouble, I should have wiped them out back then." This time, he didn't ask the old man to swear on the heavenly secret oath, because he could feel that the old man didn't lie to him. He sent a message to inform Lu Yi of this matter. In the ruins of a conquered station, Lu Yi checked the message from the sect leader. In Golden Cloud Tower, Lu Yi was deep in thought. He had heard the name of this force before. On the top of the Golden Light, Senior Sister Wei Yang, who came to save him, specifically told him about 3 sections. One was Sacred Fire Sect, one was Golden Cloud Tower, and the other was 100 Refinements Valley. These 3 forces were originally first-rate sects, either first-rate or second-rate. However, they were beaten down by the Jade Blood Sect, and all the Divine Sea Realm cultivators in the sect were slaughtered. Until now, they had not recovered and were only at the 4th or 5th rate. Lu Yi was no stranger to Sacred Fire Sect. His last opponent on the top of the Golden Light was a holy maiden of Sacred Fire Sect. That woman destroyed her spiritual orifices to fight with him, but was killed by him. Sacred Fire Sect Station had already been destroyed. Lu Yi had a deep impression of this group of Dharma cultivators whose brains had been burned by their own sacred fire. Therefore, when he led the first coalition army to fight in all directions, he kept an eye on Sacred Fire Sect Station and advanced all the way. He didn't really target them, but just went with the flow. Lu Yi had never come into contact with 100 Refinements Valley, so he investigated it carefully. It was very far from here. Looking at Golden Cloud Tower's position, it didn't seem very far. Based on the speed of the coalition army's advance, it would take less than 3 days to reach Golden Cloud Tower's station. He raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint. Chapter 337. On the spirit peak of Crouching Dragon Mountain, the headmaster received Lu Ye's message again. He looked flustered and exasperated. "He's rebelling. He's rebelling." Pang Jin hurriedly said, "Elder Tang, don't worry." "What happened?" The headmaster said, "He told me to give him 3 days. He wants to destroy Golden Cloud Tower's base. Otherwise, he won't be able to get his way in the future." "What kind of nonsense is this? He's so disrespectful." "Sigh, the Jade Blood Sect hasn't accepted any disciples for decade. I've forgotten how to teach them. It's my fault." He looked bitter and hateful, but anyone with a discerning eye could see his intentions. Pang Jin didn't know how to respond. He couldn't play along. After all, he was the deputy leader of the Haotian Alliance. He was someone who cared about his reputation. The elder from the Myriad Devil Ridge had a dark expression. After a long while, he squeezed out a sentence. "Tell him to attack Golden Cloud Tower directly. If he dares to touch any of the other Myriad Devil Ridge bases along the way, the Myriad Devil Ridge will fight to the death with the Haotian Alliance. Heavens will bear witness to this." Pang Jin's expression turned serious. The headmaster nodded. I'll make it clear to him and ask him to focus on the big picture. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, Lu Yi checked the message from the headmaster. He knew that things couldn't go on like this. Ever since he came out of the Tianyan sect, he had gathered 2 Haotian alliance armies and conquered more than 100 forces from the myriad Devil Ridge. His side had gained a lot while the myriad Devil Ridge had suffered heavy losses. Now that the Divine Sea Realm cultivators from both sides were negotiating, they had basically reached an agreement. If this continued, there would be no way to end it. Of course, with his methods and abilities, he could continue to open up more battlefields and conquer more myriad Devil Ridge bases. However, if he did that, he would be forcing the myriad Devil Ridge to fight to the death with him. It was a good idea to take advantage of this opportunity to retreat and extort some benefits from the myriad Devil Ridge. Thinking about this, Lu Yi asked Luo Fu to gather the guardian envoys from all sides for a meeting. These guardian envoys had obviously received instructions from their respective elders. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't need to explain much. Everyone understood the current situation. It was a pity, but there was nothing they could do. The confrontation between the two sides had always been like this. Even if one side had a great advantage and could cripple the other side, they couldn't let the other side see no hope. That was because the side without hope wouldn't care about the consequences, and Jade Blood Sex. After a short while, everyone dispersed and prepared to gather the cultivators of their respective sects and return home. Moments later, the Alliance army left, returning the way they came. Only Lu Yi, Hua Ci, Giant Armor, and Yi were left in the occupied myriad Devil Ridge base. Li Ti, Hua Ci and the others were stunned. What shocked them even more was that a moment later, someone really did appear from that direction. He had a jade-like face, starry eyes, sharp eyebrows, and a head of sparkling and translucent white hair. There was also a gourd hanging at his waist. Who else could it be but Li Baxian? How did you know I was here? Li Baxian was surprised. He hadn't exposed his tracks, but Lu Yi had still seen through him. Senior brother joined the Alliance army as a rogue cultivator half a month ago and chased me all the way from the Wei River to here. I would be a fool if I didn't notice you. Li Baxian had quietly rushed over when Lu Yi had led the first Alliance army to fight in all directions, but he had kept his tracks hidden. Calculating the time, it was after Lu Yi had been killed by those Heaven Rank 9 ghost cultivators. He was obviously worried about Lu Ye's safety and came to protect him. He didn't expose his tracks, not because he didn't want to meet Lu Yi, but because he felt that it would be more convenient to hide. Lu Yi had used the Heaven's Fate Pillar to teleport to Silverlight Island from the Wei River, and Li Baxian had also hurriedly followed. He had secretly killed many experts from the core circle during this time. Good! Li Baxian was undoubtedly happy that Lu Yi had such keen senses, and he finally understood why Lu Yi had dared to have the Alliance army retreat first, only bringing a few from the Blue Blood sect with him. It turned out that he had known that he was nearby. With the third place on the Spirit Stream list protecting him, as long as he didn't encounter too many enemies, he wouldn't be in any danger. Moreover, there shouldn't be anyone coming to kill Lu Yi at this time, and the myriad Demon Ridge was eager for him to stop, so who would dare to cause trouble? Are we going to Golden Cloud Tower? Li Baxian asked. He had clearly obtained some accurate information. Lu Yi nodded. Let's go. Li Baxian raised his hand, and a large spirit sword appeared in front of him. He jumped on it, and the spirit sword quickly grew in size as he did so. Lu Yi and the others also jumped on. The next moment, sword light soared into the sky. If Little Gray was still here, they could naturally take him to Golden Cloud Tower's station, but Little Gray had always obeyed the order Feng Wujiang had given him to guard the Blue Blood sect's station. It had no problem using him to travel, but he wouldn't stay outside for too long. So after the previous battle, Little Gray had already flown back to the Blue Blood sect's station. The scenery around them quickly receded, and Lu Yi sighed in amazement. He had long heard that sword cultivators were very fast, but now that he had personally experienced it, he knew that this reputation was well-deserved. Of course, this had a lot to do with Li Baxian's powerful background. While flying on his sword, Li Baxian faced the wind and drank wine in a low voice, seeming to be in a good mood. Although he wasn't a disciple of the Blue Blood sect, he was still a member of the Blue Blood sect. Now that the sect had produced Lu Yi, he felt proud. Along the way, they would occasionally encounter a few flying cultivators, but after seeing Li Baxian's sword light from afar, they would hurriedly avoid him, obviously sensing that the owner of this sword light was not to be trifled with. With Li Baxian's sword controlling technique, the journey that would have taken 3 days was completed in less than a day. Golden Cloud Tower's encampment was covered in a barrier of light. Hundreds of Golden Cloud Tower's cultivators were gathered in the encampment, and everyone's expression was extremely ugly. They had already received a message from the sect and knew of Myriad Devil Ridge's decision to give up their encampment to appease Lu Yi's anger. However, how could they willingly accept such a decision? Everything in the encampment was built by generations of Spirit Stream Realm cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower. It was built with the blood and lives of their ancestors. Therefore, even though the higher-ups had repeatedly ordered them to stay, the cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower didn't withdraw before the time limit was up. No one had expected that Lu Yi, who was supposed to arrive in 3 days, would arrive in 1 day. Once the news spread, the cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower were both shocked and furious. Soon, several hundred cultivators gathered inside the defensive formation and looked at Lu Yi through a light screen. They didn't see the Grand Heaven Alliance army, only a few people led by Lu Yi. This made the cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower somewhat restless. If they made a move now, they might be able to kill Lu Yi. However, after seeing the white-haired youth beside Lu Yi, their restless thoughts immediately calmed down. Who didn't know Li Baxian, who was ranked 3rd on the Spirit Stream list? His iconic white hair and the wine gourd at his waist were all proof of his identity. Outside the barrier, Lu Yi's gaze turned and finally fixed on a black-robed man. "Are you going to open the barrier yourself, or do you want me to break it?" The black-robed man was undoubtedly the guardian or deputy of Golden Cloud Tower, because the jade pendant that controlled the barrier was hanging on his waist. Hearing Lu Yi's question, the black-robed man just looked at him expressionlessly. Lu Yi didn't say anything else and raised his hand to summon a few formation flags. He threw them at the nodes of the barrier. As he did so, his spiritual power began to surge. In just a dozen breaths, a small gap was torn in the thick barrier. He had used this method to take over the station of Saint Sunlight Mountain. Now that he was much more proficient in formations than before, tearing a gap like this was a piece of cake. Under the shocked gazes of the cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower, Lu Yi led a few people behind him into the barrier through the gap. The gap behind him quickly closed, as if it had never appeared. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. The sound of spiritual weapons being slowly unsheathed came one after another. The cultivators around secretly surged their spiritual power, ready to attack. Li Baxian grabbed his wine gourd and took a large gulp, burped in satisfaction, and then sized up the surroundings with a smile on the corners of his mouth. His sharp gaze swept past the vital points of the Golden Cloud Tower cultivators one after another. Every cultivator he saw felt their bodies turn cold. Death was like an invisible beast that clung to their necks and licked their souls, causing them to tremble. Under the silent pressure, some cultivators couldn't stand the torture anymore. Their faces turned red, and their hands holding the spiritual weapons were shaking. They were about to explode. The black-robed man suddenly spoke. "Li Baxian, if you dare to kill a single man of Golden Cloud Tower, Golden Cloud Tower will fight you to the end." As soon as he finished speaking, a transparent dagger only a foot long was suddenly pressed against his forehead. No one could see how Li Baxian made his move. The transparent short sword silently appeared in front of a Sky Realm Level 7 cultivator. The short sword slightly shined and stabbed into the skin of the black-robed man. Dark red blood flowed down his forehead and separated at the bridge of his nose, leaving 2 blood-red lines on his face. "Are you threatening me?" Li Baxuan tilted his head and looked at him. "I dare you to say one more word." The black-robed man's face turned green, but he didn't dare to say another word. He knew that a sword cultivator would never be threatened. If he dared to say another word, he would become a dead body the next moment. He wasn't afraid of death, but if he died, the war would be unavoidable. Countless people of Golden Cloud Tower would die. A top sword cultivator's killing was no joke. Chapter 338. It could even be said that Li Baxuan was deliberately provoking them. If Golden Cloud Tower couldn't help but make a move here, there would be endless trouble in the future. Unless they were absolutely sure they could kill Lu Yi. If so, they would be the heroes of Myriad Devil Ridge. However, how difficult would it be to kill the sect exterminating Leaf under the protection of Li Baxuan? The black-robed man didn't have the confidence, so he didn't dare to make any moves. He secretly regretted it. If he had known this would happen, he would have taken his disciples back to the 9 state. He had been greedy for the 1 or 2 day time limit, and now Golden Cloud Tower was in an awkward situation. The short sword let out a slight hum, and the sword light slashed down diagonally, shattering the jade pendant hanging on the black-robed man's waist. With the destruction of the jade pendant, the great array stopped operating. Although there was still a light curtain covering it, it had lost all the power of the great array. "Giant armor, open the way!" Lu Yi ordered. Giant armor immediately moved forward. Along the way, there were cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower blocking his way. He didn't dodge at all and directly crashed through them. From time to time, there would be muffled groans and even the sound of bones breaking. With Giant Armor's powerful physique, not to mention that no one in the inner circle could compete with him in terms of physical strength, there were only a few body cultivators in the core circle. How could those cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower block him? Following closely behind Giant Armor, Lu Yi moved forward with his saber. The hundreds of cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower gritted their teeth, their eyes filled with humiliation and anger. However, without the order of their guardian, no matter how unwilling they were, they didn't dare to make the first move. Everyone knew what the consequences of making a move would be. The Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the 2 sides had already negotiated the terms. Golden Cloud Tower was Lu Ye's last stop. It was important to send this god of plague away as soon as possible. As for losing some face and some blessings from the Tianji pillar, it was not a problem. Myriad Devil Ridge would compensate Golden Cloud Tower later. This was also the reason why Li Baxuan didn't start a massacre here. Today, no matter who made a move without permission, it would destroy the peace talks between the Divine Sea Realm cultivators. The consequences were not something a few Spirit Stream Realm cultivators could bear. Giant Armor forcibly opened a path in the crowd, directly to the Tianji Hall. Lu Yi entered Heaven's secret hall and used her authority as the guardian of Blue Blood sect to begin plundering the blessings of Golden Cloud Tower's Heaven's secret pillar. On the square, the cultivators of Golden Cloud Tower closed their eyes in pain. Cracking sounds came from the divination hall as if their spines were broken. As the various blessings were plundered, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the encampment became thinner at an extremely rapid rate. The range of the encampment's radiation was also constantly shrinking. Even the defensive array that was barely holding on had shattered. A short while later, he stepped out and nodded slightly at Li Baxuan, who was standing guard outside the hall. Once again, Li Baxuan unleashed the wide flying sword. Several people jumped up one after another. Li Baxuan laughed loudly and flew up on his sword, turning into a ray of light in an instant. In all these years, he had never been so happy. With his ability on the Spirit Stream battlefield, except for a few powerhouses on the Spirit Stream rankings, he could kill almost anyone he wanted. However, They had never experienced the feeling of intruding into a sect's encampment with just a few people and brazenly plundering the blessings of another sect's Tianji pillar, while being surrounded by hundreds of enemy cultivators. The sullen look on those Golden Cloud Tower cultivators' faces when they were angry but did not dare to say anything was truly delightful. Almost at the same time that Li Baxian left with Lu Yi and the others, a group of Divine Sea Realm cultivators on Crouching Dragon Mountain's Spirit Stream Peak received the news. In that short period of time, these Divine Sea Realm cultivators had their hearts in their throat, because they had received a piece of news that made everyone's hair stand on end. Sect Exterminating Yi had only brought a few people to Golden Cloud Tower's encampment. As a result, before Golden Cloud Tower's cultivators had returned to the 9 provinces, the two sides had met at Golden Cloud Tower's encampment. No one knew what would happen next. If Golden Cloud Tower's cultivators could not hold back and made a move, then not only would the Spirit Stream battlefield be completely chaotic, even these Divine Sea Realm cultivators would have to fight here. Fortunately, Golden Cloud Tower was still sensible. Golden Cloud Tower's losses had to be compensated, but this was something that the Myriad Demon Ridge had to consider. The old man from the Myriad Demon Ridge looked at the sect master and said, "Brother Tang, this matter has been resolved satisfactorily, but don't let something like this happen a second time." The sect master nodded repeatedly. "I'll confine him later." The Divine Sea Realm cultivators from the Myriad Demon Ridge coldly glanced at the sect master. How could they not understand this old fox's thoughts? Nominally, he was going to confine Luya, but in reality, he was protecting him in disguise and letting that brat lie low. The matter this time was far too big. The matters of the Spirit Stream battlefield rarely affected the 9 provinces. After all, the Spirit Stream realm was still too low. However, this time, the Spirit Stream battlefield attracted the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of both sides to gather to discuss a solution. This was something that had never happened before. It could be said that Sect Exterminating Yi had done many things that were impossible for Spirit Stream Realm cultivators. Because of him, the Spirit Stream battlefield had been turned into a mess. If he dared to appear at the Spirit Stream battlefield at this time, he would definitely be targeted. The old man looked at Pang Zhen again. "The agreed compensation will be prepared within a month." Pang Zhen nodded lightly. He wasn't worried that Myriad Demon Ridge would go back on their word, or rather, Myriad Demon Ridge wouldn't dare to go back on their word. If they really did so, they would only be looking for trouble. A moment later, the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge flew away under the lead of the old man. Pang Zhen let out a long breath as the tense string in his heart finally relaxed. For the sake of the Spirit Stream battlefield, these Divine Sea Realm cultivators had stayed here for a few days, constantly paying attention to the situation there. It was a rare experience to be in such a state. "Let's go," Pang Zhen called out, and everyone flew up into the air before quickly dispersing. After all, they all came from different continents, so the direction they returned to would definitely be different. Halfway back, Pang Zhen said, "Old Tang, that brat is now a 9th order cultivator. After he cultivates a heaven-grade secret art, he should be able to go to the core circle." "What do you mean?" "If he wants, he can go to the Vitality Sect station to cultivate." The sect master nodded. "I'll talk to him later. It's up to him to decide." The sect master understood that Pang Zhen wasn't trying to win over his disciple or the Jade Blood sect, but was protecting him. Lu Yi had caused such a big commotion in the Spirit Stream battlefield this time, so all the forces of Myriad Demon Ridge viewed him as a thorn in their side. With his 9th order Spirit Stream realm cultivation, he was considered top-notch in the inner circle, but after he cultivated a heaven-grade secret art and entered the core circle, he would be nothing. At that time, he would definitely be targeted by the cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge. It was foreseeable that once he entered the core circle, the attacks from Myriad Demon Ridge would begin. The situation in the core circle was different from the inner circle. There were many masters there, so the response would be faster. Even if Lu Yi had the means to break the spirit array, it would be difficult for him to act as recklessly as he did in the inner circle. The Vitality Sect was a first-grade sect. If Lu Yi went to the Vitality Sect station to cultivate, he would be safer. As cultivators of the War Province, they should help each other. However, the sect master couldn't answer this question and only said that he had to ask Lu Yi. 7 or 8 days later, a sword light descended from the sky and landed in the Jade Blood Sect station. The reason why it took so long was mainly because even with Li Baxian's cultivation, it was a little difficult for him to bring a few people with him on the artifact. On the way back, everyone had to take turns to fly the artifact, so the speed was naturally much slower. However, the journey back was very peaceful. They didn't even meet a single cultivator from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Recently, the Myriad Devil Ridge had really been beaten to a pulp. Their sect's encampments had been destroyed one after another. The sect-protecting Grand Array that they relied on in the past was no longer effective. The people of the Myriad Devil Ridge were still immersed in the terrifying atmosphere of being dominated. Even though there was news that the sect exterminating Leaf had stopped, they did not dare to relax in the slightest. All the cultivators stayed in the station all day long, in case of any accidents. On the square of the Jade Blood Sect station, hundreds of cultivators who had already received the news were waiting. When they saw the sword light descend, everyone led by Chen Yu, Gu Yang, and the others bowed. "Welcome back to the sect, fifth senior brother." Just as Hua Xi had said before, when they heard that Lu Yi led the Grand Heaven Alliance's coalition army to fight in the inner circle, the cultivators of the Jade Blood Sect had been clamoring to help. However, the journey was too far, and everyone's cultivation was not high, so they gave up. In the end, when they learned that Lu Yi had pulled out a second coalition army, they sent Hua Xi as a representative to help. Now that Lu Yi had returned successfully, the Jade Blood Sect naturally welcomed him warmly. Their guardian had done so many great things outside. Even if the disciples didn't participate, they couldn't help but feel honored. Some people's identities were different because of their different standpoints. To the Myriad Devil Ridge, Lu Yi was a scourge, a heinous devil that everyone wanted to kill. However, to the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Jade Blood Sect, Lu Yi was a blessing and a hero. The group was lively, and many people were curious about the giant armor that Lu Yi had brought back. They had always heard that Lu Yi had an extremely powerful body cultivator by his side. However, rumors were just rumors. It wasn't until they saw it with their own eyes that they realized how exuberant the armor's vitality was. He Xiyin, who was also a body cultivator, couldn't help but go up and punch the armor's sturdy chest twice. The armor was completely fine, but her punches hurt. The difference in cultivation was one thing, but the difference in physique was the main reason. Looking at the lively crowd, Li Baxian, who was standing to the side, felt gratified. He felt endless vitality from these young junior brothers and sisters. He had once thought about when the Jade Blood Sect station would be as lively as the other sect stations. However, in the end, the Jade Blood Sect was about to be removed from the list. Until today, he saw the scene that he had been yearning for day and night. After a long while, the crowd gradually dispersed. "Little junior brother, I'm going back," Li Baxian suddenly said. He had once been brooding over the fact that he had to join Pillheart Sect despite being from the Jade Blood Sect, but now the knot in his heart had been untied. As long as the Jade Blood Sect still had Lu Yi, it would never decline. He could even see the prospects of the Jade Blood Sect rapidly rising under the leadership of his little junior brother. Little junior brother had done what he wanted to do but couldn't, so how could he have any regrets?